So I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. That intro segment you saw there is a work in progress. It's not final. We're just experimenting with it. We were trying to time it out and see how it would kind of work. So again, that's not the final version, but it kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of the other things that we have that we're working on to try and improve the show to make it a better viewing experience for you, our dear valued viewer. Again, I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of. A lot of things over at DC Comics, which is currently, unfortunately, quite a bit of turmoil that we will be discussing this evening. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, everyone, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. Bass God like a bass guitar. And I am the associate producer of a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently streaming for free on Tubi. And we have a very special episode for you because we actually have a special guest today, Dave. Can you tell everybody about our special guest?
Yes, the special guest is actually my brother. This is Ronnie Shinks. Ronnie is actually a part of several different. How many shows are you a part of right now, Ronnie?
2.
And what are those 2? If you'll tell our viewers what they are.
All right, so one of them is a YouTube show called Turn the Page, where we just talk about like all the things that we love. We also do some news and stuff like that as well. We've been in a bit of a hiatus, but we are returning this August. Wait, it is August, this month. And I'm also a part of this little fun thing called Saturday Night Gaming. I'm actually one of the game masters there, but I've been a player for the past... It's been a while. So it's a lot of fun. We do a bunch of like different voice acting, role playing, stuff like that. It's basically all of our homebrewed D&D tabletop sessions recorded. And it is a lot of fun. We got lots of surprises coming out for everybody as well from that.
Very cool.
Where can people find those shows if they're interested in tuning into them?
Well, you can find them on Spotify, YouTube. You can find the podcast from SNG on iTunes, pretty much Podbean, pretty much anywhere that has podcast, you'll find it. And it's SN Gaming 2017.
Very, very cool.
Very cool. Well, thank you for being here and being part of the show. You are going to be a part of our discussion of Lower Decks. I'm very curious to hear Eric's thoughts because I know initially, based on our text messages, you were not exactly feeling it initially just before you saw it. So I'm dying to hear what you actually thought after you actually watched it.
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts, Dave. I have quite a few. But we also have some thoughts from the gallery already. And James is already chiming in. He's saying thank you for the sketch cards.
You're welcome.
Glad you finally got those and that we got them out there. That's awesome. And then Bobby Chambers is apparently a D&D fan. D&D, woo, he says. So maybe we got you another potential listener or viewer for what you got going there, Ronnie.
Awesome. Definitely tune in.
And then Bobby is actually, if you notice, Ronnie, whenever the icon comes up, they'll have like a little smaller icon that's in there. So Bobby's actually on Facebook. So if you were to actually post the links actually on Facebook, like in the live chat while we're doing the show, that way he'd be able to find your show and learn more about it. So,
and then I think if you do that, it'll pop up in the big chat for all of our channels, and then I can put it on that one too. And
yeah, that'd be awesome. That way everybody can see it.
I can cut and paste it. You could also do the private chat too if you want to do that, and then I can just share it with everybody. So however you want to do it.
Hopefully I remember my password. Dear God, automatic sign in.
Well, don't kill yourself over it. You know, it's just you can even do it after we finish talking about Lower Decks if you want. You know, so don't feel the pressure to do it right now.
Oh, my man, I'm a store manager. I'll multitask.
All right, well, there you go. There you go. All right, very cool.
And Bobby Chambers said love to. I assume that means checking out Ronnie's program. So, hey, there you go.
Very cool.
One potential new fan right there.
So
we have some house business, right, Dave? We've got some house business before we start hitting Lower Decks, right?
We do. Let me, because I got the one intro to play, and I was so excited about that. Let me cue the other one up here real quick. So I posted a little bit, and I think some people have seen some of the posts online. We have the first official like Kirby Tees parody shirt is actually complete. I've test printed it. I've got it all set up the way that I was hoping it would come out. And I actually have, I actually put together something a little special here for everyone. So Eric, if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen, I actually documented the creation of the Star Dogs t-shirt. So right here, I'm in Photoshop and I am getting it ready to go. I'm basically getting it set to actually split it into two pieces because the print is so big it has to be in two pieces. All right, so now I've brought it into this software that's actually called Smart Cut, and I'm cutting it into two pieces to get it ready for print. And this software auto splits it for me. So now I've cut it into two pieces, and now I'm going to export these pieces out to a different format, and then I'm actually going to take it into the RIP software. And the RIP software is what actually produces what's called the A media, which is kind of like a film transparency. And you'll be seeing that part here in just a second. So this is the RIP software. It's called ProRip. So this is me just setting it up to go on a black t-shirt. And I'm calibrating the ink levels and the density and all this kind of fun stuff and getting it all, make sure everything's just right. So this is just checking through the settings, making sure everything's ready. And then I'm adjusting just a few other quick things. I'd had a lot of people ask me about what the process is. Now, what this is doing is actually called rasterization, and that actually creates the files that are actually being sent to a special printer. This is a Uninet printer, and this is actually printing out the film, the A media, which also looks like a transparency. So all the black of the shirt has basically been knocked out so that the garment itself will actually produce the black color that you actually see in the design. And then this is the two parts, because again, it's a two-piece design. And then right here, you can actually see that's the A media. Now this is a Hotronix heat press, because what this is sort of like a Sorry, I had to play competing with my music. My music's a little loud. Anyhow, so this is a Hotronix heat press. So basically what this is, it's sort of like a commercial grade heat transfer is essentially what it is. So this is the A and the B media, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically expose it to 312 degrees with a certain amount of pressure. And what it does is it chemically bonds the two pieces together in order to create the first part of the transfer. So this is actually the first part here. And this is the tricky part, is actually separating it. That glove I'm wearing is to prevent me from burning my hand because it's very, very hot. And this is the second part. And yes, that TV is still free in case anyone cares. I could get anyone to take it in my neighborhood. So this is the second part here. So here I'm getting it onto the heat press, and I'm taking the moisture out of it and the wrinkles out of the shirt, getting it ready to go. And then this is actually the front. This is the Star Dogs logo. I didn't show printing that, but this is me getting it centered on the garment, getting it ready to print. Just checking it to make sure it's level, make sure everything looks good. Sometimes I'm a little bit too much of a perfectionist, but I want to make sure people know that we're doing something nice that's quality. All right, so here, this is it actually coming off the heat press. And then it has to cool before I can actually take the A media off, or the transfer media off. So that's what I'm doing here. So there's the front of that shirt's done. Now this is the back. The back is two parts. It's more complicated. But you line it up, get it where it needs to be. And this is a little bit of video magic. I decided not to have you guys have to sit through the whole thing, but this is actually after the final press. So there's the front, Star Dogs, a new bone, and then there is the back of the shirt. And that's how it turned out. So there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. A little behind the scenes there from Kirby Tees. And Peggy's back. Peggy hasn't been here in a long time, and she asked, "Is that Indiana Jones music that she heard? Where'd that music come from?"
No, it's actually it's a track called Superhuman, and I actually bought the rights to that music many years ago. So I've been, I used to have a fairly active YouTube channel until YouTube made me mad, and I left. So
that was one of the reasons you left, was because they flagged the music that you had actually licensed. I remember that story quite well.
I legally licensed the rights to use that music, and they pulled my video down in the middle of the night for a copyright strike on music that I licensed.
Yep.
So, but yes, technically, I did license the rights to use that music, and I liked it because it sounded kind of very John Williams, which I think is what you're hearing, Peggy. It's one of the things I like about that track, and I thought it fits kind of good, with kind of a cool, Star Wars themed thing. So I have here the shirt. We're not gonna show too much tonight, but I just wanted to show this off. This is available over at Kirby Tees right now. So this is the actual printed shirt. So this is the front of the design. It looks crooked because I'm not holding it straight. And then this is the back of the design. But you can see it next to me. You can see it's a good sized print on that shirt. It's not small at all. I'm very proud of how this turned out. But this is our first Kirby Tees parody shirt. I thought it was kind of fun and fitting to debut it actually tonight, because we're talking about Spaceballs, and we were also talking about Lower Decks, and I thought we're talking about funny space stuff. What better time to actually debut a fun space humor-filled shirt? And again, that's available over at Kirby Tees, so you can go over to Kirby Tees, check that out. It's live now, and I hope people will check it out and support that, and that money helps us support me financially, but beyond that, it actually also goes to help support a lot of the things that we're doing here. It's going to help us to, put a little bit of money into advertising, help promote, push the show as well. So it benefits everybody. So definitely hope everyone enjoyed that. I had fun putting that together, and I just thought that'd be kind of cool. So we have several Retro Rogues shirts in the planning stages that we're going to be unveiling soon. One of them actually featuring Eric's avatar, the evil, dark lord dictator guy. He still doesn't have a name. The guy with the giant green sword
He's the
blade
base
arm.
god. That's the base god.
Man, yeah, there you go.
He's the base god. That's my avatar. So,
so we will be unveiling like cool shirts featuring, that character and doing some more stuff, and we'll do something similar because I thought this would be kind of a fun way to do it. So that's my house clearing there right off the top.
Well, Bobby chimed in and said, for anyone wondering, Kirby Tee's quality is great. Very nice fabric. So I'm assuming, Bobby, you recently got a shirt from Kirby Tees. Is that right, Dave? Did he recently?
Yes. Bobby actually ordered the logo, the Retro Rogues logo T-shirt, which is very cool.
Thank you, Bobby. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate the endorsement there. That's awesome. And for people that don't understand, Kirby Tees is one of our two sponsors. Kirby Tees is Dave's company, and the other sponsor is Bad Bob, which is my company. So we sold out to ourselves, and we're very proud of that. So this show is sponsored by us. So that's who sponsors this show. And you were talking about the combination of Spaceballs and Lower Decks, and Peggy had chimed in, which once again I want to acknowledge Peggy because we haven't seen you in a while. You were commenting before. We haven't seen you in the last couple episodes, so we're glad to have you back. And she said, so Spaceballs and Lower Decks sounds like an interesting mix. I think that's what grabbed her attention. So that's kind of cool. That was the intention of it. That's kind of why we decided to pair those two things together, was to try to get people to pay some attention.
But is it chocolate and peanut butter, or is it chocolate and vineger? Only time will tell.
Oh, by the way,
they taste great together. Or
James was also talking about the avatar. That's evil Eric. That's evil Eric. So that's actually kind of the idea there. So not a bad suggestion there.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, are we good to go ahead and get into talking about Lower Decks then?
Yeah, I think so. We did have one other. We've got to acknowledge Jane. Jane's in the house as well. So
hi, Mom.
and yes, James, we're doing shameless plugs. We do shameless plugs on the show of our own stuff. Yes, we do.
Yes, we will. We will. You have to be prepared for that. And like I said, the thing that's neat about this is a custom created piece. This is, the artwork was done by me. So if you've been enjoying a lot of the graphics and the fun things you've been seeing, I thought people, if nothing else, would enjoy it. A lot of people just been getting a giggle out of the shirt. It's funny because a lot of people don't see the Frisbee at first. And when people find the Frisbee that's actually on the shirt, that's usually one that gets the biggest smile. Because everybody sees that the tennis ball is R2-D2, but everybody seems to miss the Frisbee. It's kind of funny. And then they go, oh, look at that. So, yeah. So I just thought it'd be fun for people to check out. So,
no, it's very cool. Very
awesome.
cool.
All right. So we're good to get to Lower Decks? All right.
Let's do it.
Go. All right. So, of course, Lower Decks, I think most everyone knows. Lower Decks is on CBS All Access. It actually debuted, was it last Thursday?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow, Thursday. I wonder why they launched it on Thursday. Anyhow, so it was last Thursday that it actually debuted. This is actually the first episode. It was called Second Contact, which is obviously appropriate enough because that's what the crew of this starship specialize in, is Second Contact. So it only was fitting. So we're going to start off. We'll just talk about our initial impressions of the episode, and then we will get kind of into some spoilers and I actually dig deeper into the episode. Like I said, I'm curious to see what Eric thought of it because I know he wasn't quite feeling it. So I guess I'll go ahead and start with my impression. We should save Eric's impression. Do you want to go first, Eric, or do you want?
Well, I think we should let our guest go first, Dave.
Well,
we should let our guest go first.
Yeah, cool. Ronnie, why don't you tell us your initial impressions without spoilers of the first episode of Lower Decks?
Well, I'm really happy that I forgot to cancel my subscription to CBS All Access first. um, that was a happy surprise because when you said, "Hey, this is, we're going to do this," I'm like, "Oh!" And then I made Caleb and my wife watch Lower Decks with me tonight to get ready for the show. But we all thoroughly enjoyed it. It was hands down just hysterical. I loved every moment of it. It was good. I was a little apprehensive at first of the animation style, but after watching it, it's like, I watch regular show. How can I be apprehensive about this style? But it was really, really good. I'm definitely going to own this series.
Interesting. And it's funny that you brought up regular show. I actually started rewatching regular show on Hulu after having watched this a couple of times. Because after watching this, I was like, you know what? I want to watch some regular show. So I'm actually currently rewatching regular show as we speak because of this show. I guess, do you want to go next, Eric? I have this horrifying feeling you're going to be a major counterbalance.
Well, you've got good instincts, Dave. My initial impression, to kind of sum it up and to put it as succinctly as possible is this is going to be a long 10 weeks for me. I can just feel it. It's going to be a long 10 weeks for me. Oddly enough, actually, I don't have a problem with the animation style at all. That's probably the high point for me, is I actually enjoy that. I think we've had this discussion many times, Dave. I love really cartoony art style. I've always enjoyed that. And I think they actually do a good counterbalance with the space scenes, where the space scenes are actually rendered very well. It looks pretty cool. For me, actually, the high point was the intro. I really did enjoy the intro and the comedy of the intro. I got it. I mean, I thought it was funny, what they were doing, where it was kind of crashing and they're running away from battles and things like that. Obviously, they are not the Enterprise. They are not the A-Team. They are definitely the Z-Team of Starfleet. And I get it. I get that joke completely. But there was a lot of other stuff I didn't get. And I have to say, I did not laugh very much watching this, if at all. I did smile a few times. There were a few times I smiled. As a hardcore Trekkie, there is tons and tons of Easter eggs in this. There are tons and tons of Trek Easter eggs. And I did watch the Ready Room after this and got to see what the creator, kind of his bent on things with, Will Wheaton interviewing him and things like that, and got to see, what his take was. And I could definitely see a lot of what he was saying in the show. But once again, kind of like what happened with Picard, when I see the producers and the directors and other folks talking, I kind of want to take them to task with some of the things they said. And, as we get more into it, I can kind of tell you exactly what it was that the showrunner said that I would kind of like to take them to task on. That it's like, well, if that's the intention, that's not what you did here. Not in this first episode, anyway. If that's the intention going forward, I think the formula could work. But there was a lot that I thought didn't work in this first episode. But oddly enough, it wasn't the animation style. I've actually heard a lot of people criticize the animation style, and I like it. I don't have a problem with it. That's one thing I don't have a problem with. And I actually really like the space scenes, like the ship and that kind of stuff. I don't know. Once again, it's kind of funny. It's like the intro was like the best part for me. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that animation. And again, I even got the humor, with the ship crashing and running away and all that kind of stuff. But I know, Dave, you have a different perspective than I do. So let's hear what your general impressions were.
Yeah, my general impressions were that I enjoyed it. I've said before, one of my big problems with Picard, and one of my fears with Discovery with season 3 is the fact that you remove yourself so much from the trappings of what we think of as traditional Star Trek, uniforms, phasers, communicators, starships, shuttlecraft. Like, the more you pull away from that kind of stuff, the less it feels like Star Trek and, like some sort of a fan flick for Firefly, or a fan flick for, Farscape, or, insert any, ragtag group of people, joining cross space. Not a dig on either one of those shows at all. I quite liked Firefly and I quite liked Farscape. But the point being is that those shows are clearly not Trek, even if they might at times have influences from Trek. and sometimes take inspiration from Trek, they're definitely not Trek because they just don't have the Delta shields. They don't have the comm badges. They don't have all the, the rank pips. They don't have like all the things that when I look at it, I go, Star Trek.
Well, I would say Firescape and Firefly definitely take more inspiration from Star Wars than Star Trek.
Right.
Han Solo in particular,
yes,
the rogue character,
For sure. But all I'm saying is just that one of the things that I enjoyed about this is that very clearly, I was watching a Star Trek show. You're on a starship. They've got uniforms. There are tons of Easter eggs. And there was actually 3 genuine times I did laugh out loud. There was one that I laughed really, really hard at that I thought was absolutely hysterical, but we can't discuss it until we get into the spoilers. And I'll be honest with you, this felt the most like Star Trek of the newer stuff that they've done, except for a couple episodes of Discovery. Whatever the shortcomings of this show may be, kind of here or there, it felt the most like Trek, and that was the thing I was kind of most surprised by, is the fact that it did, for me personally, it felt like Star Trek, because they do some things that I wasn't thrilled with. There's a couple things that it's like, well, I think that's a bit much, but it did feel like Star Trek, and that was a big, big win for me. And like I said, I enjoyed it. I'm kind of looking forward to the next few episodes. I'm hoping that it'll continue to be kind of fun and we'll enjoy it. And I hate to hear that you did not enjoy it, Eric. I was hoping you would like it more, because I was watching it going, no, this is not too bad. I kind of like this. It's kind of fun, how does it compare to, last week's Star Trek, the animated series? It doesn't compare. That's still way better. It doesn't even hold a candle, but I did quite enjoy it, and I was kind of surprised because I wasn't sure just how much I was going to take issue with it. And for the most part, because it's a comedy, it got away with a lot. But I'll also say, too, that this show very clearly is trying to ride that same vein as the Orville big time. There were a couple of specific scenes that I was like going, wow, they really want to be doing the Orville with this show. So
I actually thought the intro, in a lot of ways, ironically, the intro to this is a parody of the intro to the Orville. That's how I felt with the theme song in particular. The theme music is very, very Orville. It's that classic kind of thing where you're seeing the ship going, flying around with the credits, which is also very Trek. I mean, obviously that's where the Orville got it from. But in terms of the music, that was not lost on me. I definitely thought that there was a lot of the Orville in this. And I don't know if they'll ever admit that. I'm sure they wouldn't, but you could see it. I mean, it's definitely there. We do have some comments in the Rogues Gallery, and Peggy was mentioning, I haven't gotten to see Lower Decks, so should I go and come back? And Peggy, we always try to do a spoiler-free portion of the review, and we always try to let everybody know when we're really getting into spoilers. By the way, this episode doesn't really have huge spoilers. Being a comedy, it's not that much about the story, but there is one big spoiler. So we will let you know for sure when we start getting into spoilers. And if you want to take off and come back, you're more than welcome to do that. We encourage people to do that if that's a concern, because we do not want to spoil the show for you. That's for sure. And Russ is giving us a shout out. Russ, it's good to see you. Russ, of course, is the director and creator of Routine, a film that him and Dave recently collaborated on. So, folks, if you have the opportunity to check that out, I know it's been accepted to several film festivals, and so hopefully there'll be a means for you to be able to check it out very soon. And I might have some news with Russ very soon regarding Bad Bob. We're working on something right now. So good to see you in the house, Russ. And then also, kind of funny thing with Bobby and James here. They say, so Bobby started this. He says, Eric, I'm wondering if you'll enjoy this more than Picard. And then James responds, well, Bobby, I think Eric will like anything better than Picard. So obviously these are two folks who have watched a lot of episodes of the show. And they kind of know where I'm coming from. And Bobby says, James, yeah, I think you're right. Guys, you know me better than probably some of my best friends at this point. And yes, I did like this better than Picard. I don't think there's anything I could quite dislike as much as I dislike Picard and what I felt it did to Star Trek.
Well, that's good to hear.
So I can say that. I can say that it's definitely not in the same level as Picard in terms of I don't hate this show. You know, I've only seen one episode for one thing. I don't hate this show. I hated Picard. Absolutely hated it. I mean, it was just terrible for me. But Peggy makes a good point, because we were talking about the animation style, and actually, Ronnie, that's probably a good point for you to jump back in, because you were saying you had some issues with it. And Peggy kind of hits the nail on the head, saying the animation actually reminds me a bit of the ones used for a Doctor Who cartoon I saw, which, by the way, I did not know there were any Doctor Who cartoons, so I'd be interested to see that. The story, though, is what's going to hold the audience, not the animation. And I think Peggy makes a great point there. And Ronnie, you were a little critical of the animation, so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was afraid it's going to be flash animation and stuff like that, and really choppy from when I first saw the images of it. I never saw a trailer, just images. But I was actually, while watching the show, it flowed really well. And I really dig the animation style, especially for some of the scenes we can't talk about yet. But it's very, very reminiscent, again, like of stuff like Regular Show and Close Enough. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say it like for me, it reminded me so much of Regular Show. Like I said, I started rewatching Regular Show, and because it has this sort of kind of vibe. I wouldn't have thought it's like, to do a show necessarily in this particular style, but I thought it worked really well. And I bought into it a lot faster than I thought I was going to.
And I loved. Oh, sorry. I love the like the ships and everything outside of it. I loved that animation. I mean, I thought that was great.
Yeah,
the very first scene I really enjoyed. It was very classic Trek kind of scene, at the space yard. It was very much that kind of image, and I really did like that.
Yeah, and that was the thing that, and again, those are the things that really helped to bring me into this world and really kind of suck me into the show. The first shot we get, it's the space dock. It's the classic Star Trek space dock. You see other starships flying around. I'm like, it's a Star Trek show. Like, because after Picard, that's a big thing. Because even Discovery, like, they're going so far into the future, the Federation doesn't exist. If you've seen from the teasers, they're all running around in black trench coats like they're extras from Dark City. It's like, okay, whatever. I am excited to hopefully see season 3, and I hope it'll be good. But it's literally falling into that stuff that I talked about that I don't like that they've been doing with a lot of the new Star Trek. It's cool to take inspiration from Star Wars, but when you try to be Star Wars too hard, it just doesn't work. And one of the things I liked about this is this was trying very hard to be Star Trek. And at least at the very least, I think most of us can definitely appreciate that, is that it was definitely trying to be Star Trek. If I was going to take issue with something, I'm not sold on the design of the ship. That would be my major, one of my criticisms of it is that the more I saw of the ship, the more I wasn't too super keen on the design. It's not bad. It'll probably grow on me in time. But that was one of the things I didn't necessarily particularly care for. And then I felt like the uniforms at times were a little too busy. But again, that's being really nitpicky. But like I said, overall, I enjoyed it. So it looks like we've got two kind of thumbs ups. Definitely worth checking out. And then, Eric, are you kind of like a thumbs sideways, or are you a thumbs down?
I'm probably thumbs down. It's not right. Way down, but I'm probably thumbs down. I can say, I do this a lot on this show. I can say, if I wasn't reviewing it, I wouldn't pay for this. If I wasn't reviewing this, I would not pay for this. If it was on free TV, I probably would check it out. You know what I mean? Like I'd go a few minutes in, and if if it seemed to be going in the right direction, I'd stay or I'd leave, that kind of thing. I do that with shows that I watch sometimes. I don't watch every episode. I'm like, this one's not working for me. I'm switching the channel. But you can't do that with this. You have to pay for it. So it's behind a paywall. So if I wasn't reviewing it, I can tell you I would not be paying for it. But I did pay for it, so now I'm stuck for at least a month, right? So I might as well review it anyway. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But I don't hate it. I do want to make. I don't like have this adamant hatred of this, like I do of some other things, like Picard. But I had a lot of issues with it, and we can talk a little bit more about it as we do our deep dive. But Bobby had a comment that I thought was interesting. He said they did a good job capturing the newer animation style that we see with animated comedies. The show doesn't take itself too serious, which is refreshing, and that's a good point, Bobby. I do agree with you there. This show does not take itself too seriously, although I do think in some ways it kind of tries to have it both ways. But overall, it's certainly not as dark as Picard. You'll probably hear me going back and forth about that a lot as we keep talking about it. But I kind of also want to go back to what Peggy said and then what you were saying, Dave, about the design of the ship. One of the things that's interesting is I've seen a lot of people online who hate the design of the ship. They even say it doesn't make sense. Like I saw somebody talking about, so how do you even get from the saucer section to the engineering section? Like it doesn't seem like would work unless you're like, do you go through the engine somehow or something like that? Like it doesn't seem to physically make sense. And that's a kind of funny thing, going back to Peggy's point about the animation style. And what's funny is the animation style is the first thing anybody's going to look at with this show. Unless you're just like that hardcore Star Trek fan that's completely brainwashed, and anything with Star Trek thrown on it, you watch it and you love it. I'm not one of those Trekkies. I'm not that kind of person. You can't just throw the name Star Trek on it and I love it. We know that. That's not me. But there are people like that. But for the majority of people, and especially people that are not Star Trek fans, they're going to get into this based on the animation style. That's the first thing they're going to look at because it's an animated show. And if they like this style, they're going to go ahead and check out the show. Like I said, I don't have a problem with this style. I like this kind of cartoony style. But as Peggy mentioned, that's not what's going to keep them there. Good animation or bad animation, however you look at it, that's not what's going to keep them there. They're going to keep because they're invested in the characters, because they like the stories, because it makes them laugh. This is a comedy, so it better make you laugh. If it doesn't make you laugh, there's a problem, So I think that's kind of an interesting thing as far as that whole discussion of the animation style and how important it is to actually bring the viewer in. But that's ultimately not what's going to keep someone there, is the style, whether they like it or not. It may bring them in, but the only thing that's going to keep them is whether it's good storytelling and fun.
That's not bad for me. I'm not going to say I'm a humorless person, but but I don't. It usually takes a little bit to make me laugh, and the thing I thought was most, like I said, there was a bit in here where I laughed out loud pretty hard. I thought it was pretty funny. I wonder if it was the one moment that because Eric, you said you chuckled one time, and I have this weird feeling. I think it might have been the same moment because that was clearly the best gag in the whole thing. The part I'm talking about. So we've got a thumbs down, 2 thumbs up. Are we good to maybe go ahead and maybe talk a little bit of spoilers so we can discuss a little bit more in depth?
Yeah, sure. Let me get the spoiler alert up there. And Peggy, if you have to take off, we understand that. Please come back because we've got plenty more show later. So we'll probably do spoilers for maybe 10, 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, not too long. Not too long. It'll depend upon if how if people in the Rogues Gallery want to get into it. So,
Peggy did mention, since she was the one that said she might have to take off because she doesn't want to hear spoilers, she did mention that she agrees that she'd be watching it if it was on CBS regular TV. Apparently, she has some issues where she lives that she can't even get it. Which, by the way, that is another interesting thing about this. There's no international distributor for this show, which that's got to tell you something.
That's
what it is.
Weird.
That tells you something.
Yeah. So we're going to get into spoilers now. Again, everyone, bear in mind we're going to be discussing spoilers for the first episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. Of course, this episode is called Second Contact. So let's go ahead and start off just with the opening credits. I really enjoyed the opening credits, and I got quite a bit of a little bit of a giggle at the scene where we see it's Cerritos, right? The USS Cerritos. they're like they kind of warp into this area and they kind of come around the bend, and then here's a whole bunch of Borg cubes and Romulans having it out in space. And they take a couple of shots and they turn and run. I thought that
They run
I
away.
thought that was pretty funny. And I like that, and I like the one too where you saw the
Oh, by the way,
aliens.
you know what I really liked about that for those hardcore Star Trek fans out there? They used the TNG era Romulan warbirds, not that crap from Star Trek Picard, whatever the hell that was. They used the actual warbirds from the TNG era, and they looked really good animated. I thought. They did a good job on those.
And see, that's what I'm talking about. That's one of the things I liked about it. You definitely were watching a Star Trek show, and that's one of the things I loved about it. It's just like I knew I was watching a Star Trek show. It's such a simple thing. But when you look at a lot of the stuff that we've been through with a lot of the newer Trek, they love to take them out of uniform. They love to get them off starships. I mean, at times it feels like they're trying so hard to make Star Trek Star Wars that they forget what makes Star Trek Star Trek.
They did take them out of uniform, though. They did take them out of uniform.
They did, but the way they did it was, your mileage may vary, but that was some of the stuff I wasn't too particularly keen on. But so my favorite moment in the opening credits is I love that scene where the Ceratops comes around the corner and the Romulans and the Borg are having it out, and they're like, yeah, we're not having any of this, and they turn and run. I thought the intro had a lot of funny moments. Did you guys have a particular funny moment in the intro because Eric, you did say that you liked the intro. What was your favorite moment in the intro?
Well, I saw this comment that James just made, so I have to share it because he says we need to make a team that states evil Eric hates Picard. That needs to be one of our teams. I love that. That's a great idea right there. What I liked was the style. The animation style is really what I liked, and I even thought, even though it was silly, like they're crashing into things and doing all sorts of stupid things, and really kind of showing that these guys are buffoons. I mean, that's really what they were kind of implying. Not implying. I mean, that's what the intro says. Is this is like the Z team of Starfleet, the worst of the worst, really. Except, well, we're just talking about the intro. So
yeah, we're just talking about the intro.
What do you think about the intro?
Me, I loved it. I actually share the same favorite scene as Dave. It's just, oh my God. I laughed really hard at that because it caught me off guard. I was like, oh, okay, everyone gets to see some battles or something like that, and like something go wrong. They're just like, nope. They just ducked out and ran. But I was like, I feel that on an emotional level.
Well, and like I said, one of the other things I like about that too is like if you've ever because some people may be coming into this and their most recent exposure to Trek might be actually playing, some of the actual, like the mobile games or whatever. They've got that Starfleet Battles mobile game or whatever. And I was thinking about how because I watched this episode twice. I liked it enough I actually watched it twice. And on the second viewing, when they got to that part with the intro, I was thinking about the fact that if you were playing, I could see I thought of myself like I'm playing a game and I've got a starship and I've just built the starship and you're doing your first mission. You come around the corner and you see that and you're like, no, I can't withstand this battle. I gotta get out of here quick, So in a weird way, I thought some people who just play games might actually be able to relate to that. It's like, yeah, I don't have the firepower to stay in this fight. So
that's probably why I related so much to it. I used to play Star Trek Online a while back, and I had my own ship, and I just accidentally ran from my level area to level whatever. It was ungodly high, and I was like, all right, let's see if I can attack them. Didn't pay attention, and one shot almost killed me. I'm like, nope, warp out.
Yeah. So, but I quite like the intro. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about the specific episode itself. We'll talk about kind of let's go ahead and do some things maybe we weren't too particularly keen on, and then that way we can end on a high note and talk about things that we did like. How's that? So for me, I'd say, like I said, and these are real super nitpicky. I'm not too super sold on the new uniforms. I feel like they're at times are a little bit too busy. I mean, I get what they're kind of going for, and they're not bad. It's just for some reason sometimes they just felt a little too busy. And again, that's compared to like next gen. You know, next gen the streamlined uniforms are so streamlined. You know, it's just I felt like we were just putting extra stuff on it just so we weren't just copying next gen. So that was kind of a sore point for me. Like I said, I'm not too particularly keen on the design of the Ceratops. I don't hate it, but the design of the ship was kind of at times a little off-putting. I'm sure it'll grow on me over time. And again, that's super nitpicky. And then my last one and I've seen some people react to this. While it's funny at first, and I enjoyed the gag overall, the attacks by the infected crew members and the other crew members at times seemed a little bit too extreme. You know, I got what they were going for. They're doing zombie movie, but there was a couple of times like going, man, that's a little too rough, I think. But that's just me. Those super nitpicky comments, because, you know, that, for example, the zombie attack, I love the zombie attack scene where they're in 10 forward and the cyborg guy and the other officer, they're having the date and they're having the firefight in the dining hall at the same time. Like, I got a little bit of a chuckle out of that. So I didn't hate all the zombie stuff, but it's just sometimes the attack seemed a little bit, it seemed like a little too gory at times, I guess is what I'm going for. It felt a little bit too much like a horror movie at times, but again, that's probably just me. So those are my nitpicks. So tell me, Erica, what were your, well, I wonder, you're going to have a lot of nitpicks. Should we let Ronnie go next?
I'll limit. I can limit mine.
Okay,
Actually,
all right.
I wanted to mention that the uniforms are not something that are, it's not something that I'm really that concerned about. I actually kind of like them, and I kind of see what they're going for. But then I can see how that can actually be detrimental. And what I mean is, just looking at the picture right now, you can see the elements of Deep Space Nine, the elements of Next Gen, and the elements of the movies, of the classic movies. You can see the elements of all three of those designs in this uniform. So I think it really is meant to please everyone, and in some cases it pleases no one. I think, Dave, you know that you're obviously one of those people where it doesn't please you, but I can see what they were trying to do. Because it has all three of those elements. It definitely harkens to Deep Space Nine. It definitely harkens to Next Gen, and you definitely can see the influence also of the movies with the, you know, with the gosh, I don't even know what that's called, with the more of the tunic style that you can
right
cross and all that stuff. You can see that actually in this picture here. So I actually enjoyed that. I think, but that can go against it, like I said, because that can actually create something where you're trying to please everybody and you end up pleasing no one. Because I have seen a lot of people actually criticize the uniforms. So again, it goes back to the thing about visual style. In an animated series, visual style is very important. You know, that's initially what's going to grab a lot of people or push them away. But I don't think that's necessarily what they're going to stay for. You know, what they're going to stay for is like the story and all that kind of stuff and the characters. And as far as the characters are concerned, I do not like the main character. I do not like her. I think she's a Mary Sue. She's a know-it-all. And I don't like that. I don't like the way she treats the other character we see here, because she treats him with an incredible amount of disrespect. It doesn't feel friendly. It just feels like she mocks him because he's different than her, which, you know, I'm a big person about diversity of thought and diversity of personality and the fact that you should be able to get along with people that aren't like you. And it seems to me like she wants to make him be like her, you know, because she's the best. She even says that. She says, I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. And she just seems very unchecked and, to me, very unsympathetic as a character. And that's the biggest issue I had with the show. And that's what took me out of a lot of the comedy and stuff, was like that the things that she was doing and the way she's acting. I'm just like, I do not like this person. I don't like this character. And I actually did find myself enjoying most of the other characters, even the minor ones, which in this series, the minor ones are the bridge crew. And I even thought they were kind of interesting, except for the way they treat the lower decks folks. They treat them like scum, you know. And there's a big spoiler that you find out later about this character's attitude, the main character's attitude, and towards the captain. And we can kind of leave that for that, because that's the big spoiler of the episode, is you find out the relationship between her and the captain. It just didn't make sense to me. And like, as I was watching this, it kind of ruined a lot of the humor for me and everything, because I just found her annoying. She was just like nails on a chalkboard, and it ruined a lot of the humor for me because I just didn't find her funny. I found her mean and condescending, that kind of a thing.
Interesting. So, Ronnie, if you were going to have a couple of nitpicks, what would your comments be? Sort of maybe the things that you didn't particularly enjoy.
Man, it is so minute, because I really only have one nitpick. I really wish they would have updated the phaser design. That's it. That's all.
Right.
That's all I wanted to say. It's because my wife we were watching it. She was like, "What the heck are they holding?" I'm like, "That's the phaser from Next Generation." She was like, "That looks weird." And I was like, "Well, I mean, yeah, they do look like the old duster vacuums, but no, I enjoy that stuff. It's classic designs and everything. It's just, I just kind of wish they would have updated it for this, like they updated the suits and everything, the uniforms and whatnot. I just think that would have been a natural progression of sorts. But maybe a combination of the two,
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look into and you do any kind of research into Next Gen, there was always sort of this battle that was going on with the phaser, because I know Gene wanted something that was like something small, like you could have it in your pocket. And that's why you had the Type 1 phasers, which, they look like almost like a garage door opener size, because that's what Gene felt like they would have. They'd be so advanced, they would just be these tiny little devices, and they'd have all these amazing capabilities, which kind of make me think of these things. But these things are more related to a communicator. But Gene really believed in that idea, and he was always pushing it. And I remember with the network, they were always having constant battles because they kept going. It's like, yeah, but it looks like he's pointing at him. You don't know there's a weapon there. It needs to be more like a gun. And if you actually look at the Art of Star Trek book, they talk about this, and you can see the evolution of how it goes from being, again, that Type 1, tiny little hand phaser about the size of a garage door opener, till eventually it's like a mini dustbuster, because they were trying to appease, sort of the network that felt like that they didn't feel like it was clear that when they were pointing the weapon at someone that it was in fact actually a phaser, that was actually a weapon, because it looks more like a gun. It's more obvious what it is. And even in going back to original series, it's part of the reason that they didn't use the smaller Type 1 hand phasers very much. They're always putting them in the mount, which is actually the Type 2 housing, which is what we think of as the classic Trek phaser. You don't see them using the Type 1 one very much because it was the same basic problem. If you ever notice, when they do show it, they always have a shot what's really close up to make sure that it's supposed to be a phaser. So it's interesting, and I agree with you, Ronnie, because it's funny, because in hindsight, I'm thinking the same thing too. You would have thought that maybe they would have updated it a little bit, just because I think the confusion that Casey's having about it looks weird, not really sure what it is. They were having those problems back when Next Gen was first on the air. So it's interesting that problem kind of weirdly perpetuates itself. It's not immediately clear. It's not immediately clear to someone who's not initiated exactly what it is. So that's
exactly what they called it. The first season of Next Gen, they called them Dustbusters. That's what the fans called them, because they literally look like Dustbusters. They were even worse that first season of Next Gen, because they were really wide at the barrel, and they absolutely did look like Dustbusters. They were really goofy looking, and I'm sure one of the reasons they did that, now with you telling that story, Dave, is that they wanted it to be very obvious they had something in their hand, so you could see it. It's just that it ended up being kind of goofy looking. That's a pretty interesting story right there. I didn't know that about the argument that Gene had, that he wanted to have little boxes, which I think is kind of funny, because there's no optics on that, and there's no possibility of putting optics on a little box like that. So how would you be able to aim very well with something like that? I guess they weren't really thinking about that at the time, but what I guess, I agree with Ronnie that some sort of update to the phasers is probably needed at this point, because there's definitely some problems with that design.
And I was going to point this out too, since we were talking about it. So this is actually, it's kind of dusty. I have a lot of props here in the studio, but this is a next gen, and this is kind of the style that they were actually using in lower decks. And then when you point it at them, you can see, to me, this style of phaser always reminded me of the original series, the Romulan Disruptor. That's what it always reminded me of. So,
see James' comment there?
Yeah,
they need to be redesigned by Dyson.
as opposed to, again, Star Trek original series, which of course this is the classic phaser, but then this unit here on top, this is actually the Type 1 phaser, and you would occasionally seeing some of the characters actually using it. I think the most dramatic use of this phaser, actually the Type 1, which comes out of this housing. The Type 1 is actually in Seated on the Edge of Forever, when that alcoholic finds McCoy's and accidentally sets it to basically self-destruct, and it vaporizes him. And I have something else interesting I want to show you guys too that I didn't realize until after the fact. I'm going to stop my cam here for just another minute. Let me go grab it.
So James was mentioning that I assume he means the TNG phaser. It looks like a scanner for inventory.
Well, see, to me, it looked like an electric shaver.
And then Jane mentioned that the part of the uniform I was talking about, the one from the image here, the upper part of the uniform is called a yoke. I did not know what that was actually called. Said it's called a yoke.
So this here, just real quick, this is probably one of my favorite phaser designs. This is from Motion Picture. I think most people know how much I love motion picture. What's interesting about this is when you read the tech manuals and stuff, which is also the same one that Kirk was using in Wrath of Khan. What's interesting about this particular phaser is they talk about that it actually has a phaser 1 hand unit as well, and it does. So this top part comes off so that even in motion picture era, if they wanted, they could have a again, you see it's about the size of a remote, like a garage door opener. But it's the same thing. And in the second unit, the base unit actually amplifies the power. And I turned this on, but I think I took the batteries out. But yeah, even this motion picture era one has the same capability, which I never realized that the motion picture era one had a Type 1 component. I figured it was just a solid piece, because when you look at it, that's what you think. So yeah, phaser design's an interesting thing, Ronnie. And you think too, because you see how many of these props I have?
Yeah.
You would think they would come up with a new one just so they could sell me another prop, right? Yet for some reason, they didn't do that. I'm always surprised when they don't do that, because there are people that buy these things. Just gonna say.
Yeah, I have a Wrath of Khan one myself.
Yeah, I love the Wrath of Khan one.
Me too.
So yeah.
No, that's very cool. And you're right. That is kind of a missed opportunity there, just in terms of marketing and all that kind of stuff. But
well, if they're tuning in, now they have an opportunity.
That's right.
Perhaps.
Dave will buy it.
I don't think they'll be watching our show, but you'd
be surprised.
Who knows? No, that's an interesting thing to bring up, Ronnie. I wouldn't have thought about that, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying. I feel like the design-wise, there's a few little things kind of here and there could definitely be tweaked. That's one of my biggest kind of, I think, if I'm going to come up with something I wasn't particularly thrilled with, that would be one of the things I would say I wasn't particularly thrilled with. So let's talk about some of the things that we liked here real quick while we're still in the spoilers here, and then we'll wrap this up. So, Eric, why don't you go first, because I know that you didn't like the show. You said that there was a scene where you chuckled. What was the joke that actually made you chuckle?
It was kind of the stupidest thing, but to me, it was just kind of Trek. It was kind of one of the real moments that I could kind of see in my head as, Starfleet officers, specifically engineers, being like this. You talked about the date, how they're still doing the date in the middle of this attack when everybody's starting to turn into zombies. And actually the rest of the crew is actually like fighting the zombies. And these two people are still on their date, just talking to each other. And then, of course, as it progresses, they start getting more involved with helping out the situation, but they're still on the date and they're still talking. Anyway, the cyborg character, he gets fascinated by this diagnostic error that shouldn't have happened in the middle of all this. And he's just intrigued by it. He's an engineer, he's a cyborg, and he's just totally intrigued by it. Whereas, of course, the girl's like, who's a Trill, by the way, the Trill girl's just kind of like, what? You know what I mean? Like, who cares? And because she's coming on to him and the whole deal. And he's just like really into this little diagnostic error. Then later, he's talking with the Orion girl about that situation and basically why the date didn't work out, because he was like, she totally ignored this, and it was just like the Orion girl is kind of like, oh my God, like, for a second, meaning like, how stupid could you be? You left her for this. And then she's all like, oh my God, how could she not be into that diagnostic error? That totally shouldn't have happened. That doesn't make any sense. That's the part that actually made me chuckle a little bit, because that to me is a very Trek kind of thing. Very like, you have to be a total Trekkie to kind of even get that at all, because I could just see that this engineer being so obsessed with this little error that happened on the ship and trying to figure out what went wrong, because that's exactly what the engineers in Trek are like, especially if you're like a Deep Space Nine fan, you know all those little, literally O'Brien was like in every little crevice trying to fix things all the time because they were in a Cardassian station. He's constantly trying to fix things and trying to, track down all these problems. In fact, there's a whole episode, basically that's what it's about. And he kind of ends up having like this breakdown, and there's a plague and all this kind of stuff because he's basically overworked from all the stuff that he's trying to track down all the problems. Anyway, that was the part that kind of made me chuckle, just because I thought it was a very Trek joke. You know what I mean? Nobody else is going to get that at all other than a hardcore Trekkie. Anybody, a normie is going to be like, what? I don't even get it,
The joke that I laughed at the hardest, the one that actually made me burst out laughing, was actually the comment where it's after I think they're trying to escape the spider creature, and it's about the time that she's giving him the whole thing about, I've done this and I've done that, and he's trying to kind of tit for tat, type of deal. And then she's like, and obviously that doesn't count, Earth, and he's counting Earth and whatever. But in the midst of that conversation, and I don't remember exactly what it is now, but she makes this offhanded comment about being trapped inside a sentient cave. And she's like, that's a dark hole that knows stuff about you. That made me laugh out loud. I don't know what it was about that, but it struck me really funny. And I literally laughed out loud at that moment. Like, and that was the hardest laugh I had, because there was just something about that. I thought it was really funny. So tell me, Ronnie, what was your favorite sort of like moment, or what was one of the things that you liked the most about Lower Decks?
Well, just first, I work in retail, so my humor has gotten super dark. So I actually really laughed when, just to start off, when they're on the planet talking to him and the guy gets bitten by a mosquito or something, he just kind of slaps it. And when I saw that, I was like, oh no.
What's going to happen? Come back to haunt him. Yeah, I thought the same thing.
And then when he's just sitting there and like they're talking about, yeah, I'm just enjoying having this off time. And I saw him in the background, I'm like, it's about to go down. What's about to happen? And then like he turns into a zombie and like just like vomits on the person and bites. I was like, oh my God. It was just, I just thought that whole thing was hysterical, because it's like this show is showing like all the, like, what if everything just went wrong? Because I've always wondered about that. It's like, like you have like the episodes like where things start to go wrong. I'm like, what about the really horrible things for the crews that are not really capable of handling such situations? And that's what this is. Because like they're just sitting there like fighting them and shooting and everything. And then the other thing that made me laugh really hard was when the Ryan girl was in the med bay.
Yeah, was it?
And like she was, and the cat doctor or whatever just told her, it's like, here, or the science officer, excuse me, told her, it's like, here, hold the heart and pump it. And like every time she was pressing it, and then like the guy was like, it hurts when you squeeze it. And like every time she's going, it's like, ah, ah.
Now, that was enough. I shouldn't have laughed at that, but that was enough. That was one of my 3 moments I laughed out loud. Even though it was ridiculously gory, I did find some humor in that moment because I just thought that was kind of just, I was like, wow, they're really going for it here. So
yeah, this show is very, very reminiscent of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
But but I mean, I started laughing right when it first opened up. I mean, like when she was sitting there swinging the batleth around, it's like, rah, 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 and then like sliced his leg open. I was like, oh my God. I knew I was in for a treat when that happened.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I think at that point, unless anyone has anything else they want to add, I think that's probably pretty good for.
Well, I did want to talk about the big spoiler, which the one big spoiler is the relationship between the main character and the captain. What did you think of that? Did you see it coming? And what do you think of that overall in terms of the way? What really got me was she makes a comment where she says the bridge crew are all just about themselves and all out for the glory. And then when you find out her captain is her mom, you're like, well, okay, that took a weird turn in my mind. You know what I mean? So that's the way she sees her mom, that she's just a glory hound that doesn't care about the rest of the crew or anything like that. I thought that was really weird. That's what I thought. I thought it was really weird.
Yeah, it was a little strange. I would have thought that in the Trek future that a parent and a child get along a little better, but I don't know. I kind of saw it coming because it just seemed like an awfully big coincidence. A lot of what was going on surrounding those two characters, and when they would interact the way they were interacting, I was kind of thinking there was something going on there. And then when they did the reveal, I didn't hate the reveal, but at the same point too, Eric, I could see what you're saying, that it seems a little weird that she would have that attitude when you realize that the captain of the ship is actually her mom. That is a little strange. I would totally agree with that. But at the end of the day, like I said, it didn't affect my enjoying the show too negatively. It'll depend upon what they do with it going forward, to be honest, because you never know. It's like they may wade waist deep into that and try to say something, or it may just be like a weird surface gag. Because when they showed the teaser for the next episode, I did think it was kind of funny because it reminded me of a kid taunting a parent where she's throwing up the Vulcan salute things or whatever on the way out the door, and she's like, stop doing that, and he just kept doing it on the way out the door. That's very sort of a kid kind of patronizing an adult kind of thing to do. But at the same point too, when you look at their ages, you think they'd be beyond that. But again, it's important to remember it's supposed to be a comedy. It's supposed to be a little silly and outlandish at times. So I don't know. And it's weird too because, and I mentioned this to Eric, Red Skirts is a Star Trek parody. It's obviously has a lot of humor in it. But one of the most interesting things about this is when we were coming into this, I was a little concerned that we'd be kind of mining kind of the same area. And one of the things that actually made me feel good is kind of these things you're pointing out, Eric, is pretty far away from what we do in Red Skirts. So they're two completely different things. Even though they're humor-based and at times tonally they have a similarity, it's very interesting the things that they wanted to parody and poke fun of at Star Trek versus the things that we wanted to parody and poke fun at Star Trek. We had two completely different viewpoints, of how to approach the material, which is very interesting because this was a lot more slapstick than I was thinking it was going to be. I thought it would be a little bit more cerebral, but it was a lot more slapstick. But at times it worked for me. So Yeah, but I like I said, the big reveal. I found it a little weird, but it kind of fit. And I think time will tell. How they play that out. Um, how well it resonates or sits with me down the road. Because I think we'll have to get a few episodes in to really see what they're intending to do with this dynamic. Because weirdly enough, we've kind of already had this dynamic. There was a similarity in this dynamic between what was going on with Michael Burnham and her mother, actually in season 2 of Discovery. For those people who watched Discovery, that was a kind of a plot thread. So we'll see. We'll have to see what they do with it. What did you think of that, Ronnie? What did you think of the big reveal that it turns out that our main character that her mom is also the captain of the ship?
Well, for me, it really explained a lot of things about the main character's actions and her attitude towards, everybody that's in command, the bridge crew. And it also, because like Eric was saying, like he didn't understand like why with that being her mom, why she would treat them so badly. Well, she's been on like 5 different ships, and like at the end of it, like her mom starts talking about, it's like, I want her off this ship. She cannot work here. To me, it just sounds like the mother and a daughter have a really terrible relationship, and the daughter has always felt neglected and not loved by her mother. And that was really her only insight to the bridge crew, was through her mother and her dad. So maybe that's why her views are skewed in that way, because her mom is always going for glory, which you do see, because I forgot his name, but the guy with the purple hair, like when he came back, like in the goo and everything, he was a very integral part of saving the entire crew, and she did not mention any of it. She didn't give like any props to anybody else. It's just she's so busy just trying to hog glory and stuff like that, which honestly just shows she's just a really bad captain. But again, I don't know. It just shows. I liked it. I like the twist. Her dad was hysterical when he was trying to just hang up, because it looks like he doesn't like the mother.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did think that was funny, where he was like, okay, I gotta go.
Yeah. But I can see why. She's just woof. But
yeah,
I want to see what happens for sure.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, that's an interesting perspective, because that's like I said, that's something that I hadn't thought. I mean, like I said, I hadn't thought too much about it. I know they're going to do something with it, but I honestly, Eric, I hadn't analyzed it too much. Like I said, I did find it kind of made sense, but at the same point, when you look at the relationship between the two of them, it seems a bit unusual. But then again, I have no issues with my mom when I make this comment, but I've had issues with, a parent before, you know what I mean? That's obviously strained things, and my brother knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so we could kind of relate to that thing where it's sort of like, I can't deal with this person, for whatever reason. So it's interesting. It's interesting. So we'll have to see what they do with it. Like I said,
it's not very funny. I think that's my main point. It's not funny.
Well, and
that's my problem with it. It's not funny. It's not. It's a little bit too much reality for me, and a really, like you mentioned, very goofy, slapstick kind of thing. Those two things don't work together. You know what I mean? They just they don't. Not for me. One moment she's stabbing her friend with a batleth, and the next moment we're finding out that she hates the bridge crew because she hates her mom. I mean, come on. I mean, that doesn't. Those two things don't really go together very well. At least not in my mind. They're hard to reconcile.
Yeah,
it's totally difficult for me to figure out where I'm at.
Well,
go ahead, Ronnie.
I was going to add, it's akin to like the comedy / drama style of like Rick and Morty, again, like regular shows, stuff like that. And also, I think this is a CBS production. How I Met Your Mother was full of comedy, but definitely had its serious moments and its drama lurking beneath the comedy or the comedic moments and stuff like that. And I think that's what they're trying to go for in this. which I hope it's more slapstick than drama, because my God, it's 2020. We need laughs. But again, it's like I thought it was really solid, and I like it. I mean, but then again, I like shows like that. I like the clashing themes and stuff. Unless it's something like the live action Justice League movie, which is two different. Well, we're not going to get into that.
Yeah. The Snyder Cut, Ronnie, when the Snyder Cut becomes available, obviously, if you want to come on the show, you're welcome to come on the show. I know we will be talking a lot about that. So
be there.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Just a little bit of stuff that they've released. I didn't hate the Justice League movie, but at the same point, I don't necessarily love the Justice League movie either. But that shot that they revealed, which is way off topic, but that shot they revealed where Alfred's working on the car, and then Superman shows up and he's in the black and the silver suit. I'm like, okay, all right, now you got my attention. So, yeah, because I think that movie would benefit with less CGI removal of facial hair, because it made that movie really weird.
Yes,
I could see that, and I like that movie. I actually like that movie quite a bit. But I totally see the CGI hair scene kind of messes things up a little bit. Yeah,
it's like the first thing. That's the thing that killed me. It's like you think they'd hide a little bit more, and like the movie starts with this little kid shooting that video of Henry Cavill, and that mustache like replacement is so obvious, and his face looks slightly deformed. And I'm like, why are you starting the movie with this? Can we not dwell on the stupid mustache thing? Can we start with something else, and then you guys can double back to this? Like, why are you just right off the bat going, hey, Henry Cavill's face is going to look a little weird here and there. We just want to get you used to it right off the jump, so you just think he looks slightly deformed. It's like, okay.
But it's Joss Whedon. I had to have my own view.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'm very curious to see what they do with it. So again, for those of you actually who tuned in here to talk about Lower Decks, we got 2 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down on the first episode, which was Second Contact. So obviously come back if you're not willing to hang around for the rest of the show. You don't have to. I'd like for you to. But obviously, if that's what you're here for, definitely come back and join us next week. We'll be talking about the second episode of Lower Decks. We'll see how everybody feels about it then. So awesome. All right. So Ryan, I know you said that you had some stuff to do, so I don't want to hold you up anymore because unless you want to hang around for the news segments.
Yeah, I can hang around for the news segments. I haven't had really much free time to do that. I was straightened up the office and everything, but the camera's not working, so you don't get to see the labor I did today.
Wow.
I will send you pictures. But there's Punisher and a TIE fighter, so there's that.
Punisher and a TIE fighter.
Awesome.
Yep. He has a rocket launcher, and he's has a lid open, Grand Moff style.
Oh, well, there you go.
Moff Gideon style, excuse me.
Well, there you go.
I was going to say
Grand
Moff style.
Is that the same thing
as that makes more sense. Not Tarkin. Gideon.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So we're going to go from obviously talking about Lower Decks. We're going to switch over and we're going to talk about pop culture news. I do have the banner up, Eric, if you want to switch over. So here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything interesting happening in the world of pop culture news that we think you, our dear valued viewer, our dear valued listener, will find interesting, something hopefully worthy of conversation. Obviously, it normally is just something that either piques Eric's interest or it piques my interest, or we just think it's something that we think you would enjoy discussing. So my topic is a little weird this week because it kind of blurs between pop culture news and actually streaming wars. I am concerned my topic's going to take up a lot of time, so I just have one major talking point tonight that's going to kind of blur between the two. Eric and I discussed it previously. We're just going to kind of roll that into streaming wars, actually. So that's what we're going to basically hit on my topic that I have for tonight. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up first for this week's installment of Pop Culture News?
Well, in some ways, it's going to be a little bit of a tease to what we're going to be talking about in the streaming wars, and we're going to be talking about AT&T and Time Warner and streaming wars. For anybody that's wondering, that's what we're going to be talking about because that is big, big, big news right now. And so, Time Warner, AT&T, whatever you want to call it these days, they are making a lot of news. But this is some news that I actually thought was interesting and positive. And I don't know, this was something actually I'd wanted to talk about on one of our previous episodes, but I didn't get around to. And since then, this rumor has developed. So this is from the site Looper, and it says why Batman fans are freaking out over DC fandom. And it says after 2 successful Batman films, director Tim Burton walked away from the franchise, with star Michael Keaton hanging up his pointy ears as well. A few years later, Joel Schumacher took the director's chair, helping Val Kilmer find the Bruce Wayne beneath Batman's cape and cowl. Batman Forever kept up a pattern Burton had established in Batman Returns and featuring multiple villains, bringing in Tommy Lee Jones to become Harvey Two-Face Dent and Jim Carrey to bring Edward Nygma, a.k.a. the Riddler, to Myanical life. Sorry, can't pronounce today. So we had talked about Joel Schumacher's recent passing on this show, and we did a bit of a tribute to him. What is going on now is there are all sorts of rumors about a new Batman Forever director's cut. And this rumor started a while ago, and this is the latest salvo into that rumor. So the reason that this is connecting to fandom is because on August 7th, when they announced this event, they mentioned that Val Kilmer was going to be a special guest. And a lot of people are why. Now, Val Kilmer is, if anybody who might not be aware of this, Val Kilmer has had some major health problems. He had throat cancer, and he had an operation to remove that cancer from his throat. So he doesn't sound like Val anymore. I've actually heard him since the operation, and he sounds very different. He looks different. He's gained some weight, all that kind of stuff. Interestingly enough, he is going to be in Top Gun Maverick. That's been confirmed. He actually is going to be in it. And I'm really wondering how they're going to put him in there, what his character is going to be like, how they're going to deal with his voice. But what a lot of people are wondering is why he's going to be attending Fandom, which is basically DC's virtual event. And what a lot of fans and people are speculating is that he is indeed going to be announcing this special director's cut of Batman Forever, because people think it's very unlikely he would be involved with any other kind of project where he would actually have to be acting again or something like that, or becoming Batman again. There's that rumor out there that Michael Keaton is actually going to be Batman in the Flash movie. So a lot of people are speculating on this, and there's been all these rumors about this, director's cut of Batman Forever, which is actually supposed to be much darker than the film that we actually got. And some people are thinking that's what Val Kilmer is going to announce at Fandom. Dave, Ronnie, had either one of you heard about this?
I've heard a lot about it. A lot of the material they would actually use for a director's cut is actually on like the deleted scenes. I think the big one that people like to point at or focus on is actually the shot where Kilmer works his way into the cave and he comes face to face with the giant bat. That's actually the shot where Kilmer is standing there with his arms outstretched, and the bat has its arms outstretched, and they're staring at each other, and the camera is kind of going around them like 180 degrees or whatever it is. That shot actually was in the first trailer actually for Batman Forever, but it's not in the movie. This happens after he has spoiler alert. This happens after he has the realization that in the Red Leather book, that there's an entry there by his father where his father says they want to stay in, but Bruce wants to go to the movies. So we're going to go to the movies. And so therefore, since he's been a kid, he feels responsible for his parents' murder because he basically wanted to go out and do something. And if they hadn't gone out and done something, his parents would have lived. So there's a lot of darker elements that come into play. But I'm going to be honest with you, there's a lot of sillier elements that come into play too that I don't know if would necessarily make the film darker per se. It may make it different. It may expand upon some things. For those people just desperately curious to see an expanded version of Batman Forever, actually Rene Auberjonois, who actually played Odo in Deep Space Nine, he actually plays a scientist. I think the scientist's name is actually Dr. Burton. He shows up at the very, very end of the movie when Nigma is actually in Arkham Asylum. It's the scene where Jim Carrey comes up and he says, "I'm Batman," and he's flapping his arms, kind of like the Wile E. Coyote did in we had the bat suit and he got blown up by the Acme bomb and he's flapping his arms. It's a whole callback to a lot of Looney Tunes cartoons. But in that particular scene, that's where the scene where Rene Auberjonois is. And if you actually go back and you actually check out the novelization, he actually narrated it. There's all kinds of material that had originally been scripted that is in the novelization that they didn't even try to work into the film. So if you're desperate for an expanded version of Batman Forever, go find the audio novelization as read by Rene Auberjonois, and there's your expanded version. Because I'm going to be honest with you, as much as I love Batman Forever, and I love Batman Forever, and this might be kind of interesting, if you watch some of those deleted scenes, there's a reason they're not in the movie. They don't really play quite right. And as much as that is an interesting art house moment, the fact that Val Kilmer is staring down a giant bat the size of a man kind of doesn't make any sense. You know, it's like, is there really a giant bat down there? Because if it was Man-Bat, that's completely different. Like if he has Man-Bat trapped in the Bat Cave, that's a whole different story. You know, but otherwise, I don't see how that's going to work. I mean, what do you think, Ronnie? I mean, how do you feel about the idea of a darker, different cut of Batman Forever?
Just makes me wonder if there's footage that we haven't seen yet, you know, and deleted scenes and stuff like that. That's what I'm starting to get a wind of. And really, with like all the support that the Zack Snyder cut got, I mean, I'm thinking we're going to start seeing a lot of different director's cuts come out. You know, I mean, people are starting to campaign for a David Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, too. Now, am I interested in seeing a director's cut of Batman Forever? Yes, that's just because I'm morbidly curious. You're talking to the person that willingly watched the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie and also the Justice League unaired pilot. And I also watched the unaired Aquaman pilot where he killed somebody with a starfish.
With a starfish. Yeah, that thing is not right. The thing is not right.
Like a shuriken, Eric. A shuriken.
Yeah. Who knew that Aquaman could be so hardcore? Yeah, so I guess that's, like I said, Eric, that's my kind of take. It's like, you know, would I be curious to see it? Yes. But I have some concerns about it. I quite like the film as it currently sits, you know. So I don't, you know, it's kind of weird. Every once in a while something will happen and it gives me that opposite perspective. Like, for example, like I'm excited to see the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League movie, but then some people are like, the Justice League movie's fine. I like it as it is, you know. And it's every once in a while something happens like this, and I go, okay, I understand this point of view. Yeah, well, and for and a flip, again, you know, talking about like myself, like for example, like I quite love Dark Knight Rises. I know a lot of people don't like Dark Knight Rises. I really like Dark Knight Rises. Like I'd say that Dark Knight Rises is actually my favorite Batman movies because I watch it over and over and over again. And I used to tell people, I still tell people, I said that it's the first time I could understand why someone could like Return of the Jedi better than Empire Strikes Back, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Empire is clearly, in my mind, the better film, but there are some people who just love Return of the Jedi more. And my love of Dark Knight Rises was the first time I go, I kind of get it. On paper, talking to someone doesn't make any sense. There's no way it's a better movie than Dark Knight, but for some reason, Dark Knight Rises is the one I always come back and rewatch. So there you go. So who knows? Maybe interesting.
And, well, the big question would be if this is not happening, what is Val Kilmer going to be doing at Fandom? Why is he there?
We're going to get to it later. My concern is who's going to be left around to do the DC fandom. Because
that's a valid concern. That's a valid. Well, Val's going to be there, so
yeah. I'm sure they had a very specific plan for what they wanted to do with this, but it sounds to me like whatever they had planned, I think all that's up in the air now. They may still be announcing things, but whether they actually come to pass now, that's the real question. But again, we won't get to that till we get to the streaming wars. But there's a lot going on at DC that has me questioning, even if they had planned to have Val Kilmer there and announced this, I'm now of the opinion it's like I'm not even sure that it will even actually get greenlit and actually become a thing because of what's going on. So
they might just be doing a honoring of Joel Schumacher.
Right, that's the other.
It could be. It could be, and that would be appropriate.
No, that's part of the speculation as well. That's a lot of people think that's exactly what it is. It's going to be a tribute to Joel Schumacher, so that's very possible as well.
Very cool, interesting. I'd be down for that for sure. So what else do you have, Eric?
I wish he was here in the Rogues Gallery tonight, but we had somebody that was inquiring about this, so I thought it was worth mentioning because it only recently became official. So this is from BBC News, and it says, Disney ends the historic 20th Century Fox brand. We had someone in the Rogues Gallery last week. We were talking about the fact that we knew that the studio had been renamed. So, it's no longer 20th Century Fox, as far as the movie studio. Now it's just 20th Century Studios. And he had brought up, well, what's happening with the television brand? And there was speculation in the Rogues Gallery that would just be rolled into ABC TV. And I was even thinking that's probably what they would do. Well, that's not what they did. What they did do is actually just rename it. So it says Walt Disney has brought to an end one of the best known names in the entertainment industry, 20th Century Fox. So it has rebranded one of its TV studios as 20th Television. So basically the television side of 20th Century Fox is now going to be known as 20th Television. This follows a January rebranding of the 85-year-old film company, 20th Century Fox, as 20th Century Studios. So basically both, we have the rename basically of both brands now. So the Fox, 20th Century Fox brand is basically officially gone. It's going to be still very similar. They are going to be keeping the fanfare, as I understand. So they're still going to be keeping some of that lineage, but that's what's happening. So they've both been renamed, rebranded. 20th Century Fox as a studio is no more.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Really kind of crazy. And it was interesting because we did have a commenter. He was actually new to the show and had actually brought this up, and you had mentioned that and had been talking with him just briefly about what was going on. That's kind of crazy. The world's changing a lot. I guess that's all I got. The world's changing a lot. What about you, Ronnie? What's your reaction to this?
They really could have picked a better name.
That's
20th
true.
Television. It's
actually 20th Television. 20th Television. That's the television side.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, it's the 20th Television. What is it? The 20th Television set company?
It's one more than the 19th Television.
I'm just like, do they only have 20 TVs at Disney? Are they really that conservative?
Maybe. 18th Television, 19th Television, 20th Television. Yes.
Oh, they really should have.
One more than 19th Television.
Yeah. I have beef with the name, but still, that's kind of sad that they did that. But, I mean, everybody saw it coming because, they absorbed Fox Studios and such.
And it's like we're only now. It's so weird because I think only now are we beginning to see the impacts of when Disney bought Fox. Kind of
Yeah.
slow because it's kind of slowly been kind of coming out, like the impact of them acquiring Fox. And then you look at what's happening with the AT&T Warner thing, and man, just I think this is just we're just going to continue to see this because um, I don't understand this idea that you buy something and once you get it, you take it apart and you dismantle it. But apparently in business, that's how you establish that you're in charge or something, I guess. So
Yeah.
um, I don't. I mean, to me, when you look at the history, you look at legacy. When you buy a brand, you buy a brand for its legacy. You buy a brand for its history. You buy a brand for the cachet and the subtle things that a brand has done over time. And then when you rename something or you change it too much, as most of us hopefully watch and they're familiar with marketing advertising, that in a sense you're kind of starting over. So if you're going to name it 20th Television, you might as well just named it Mouse Ears TV. I mean, if you're going to rename it, just go for it because the damage to the brand is so severe when you do that that a lot of people are going to be like, I've never heard of 20th Television. They're not immediately going to make that connection. So as far as a brand goes, you're starting over anyway. So just call it something, goofy TV. I mean, you might as well just call it anything now. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. And I agree with you, Ronnie. I think 20th Television is an unfortunate name. You know, I don't get that.
Maybe they have the same people naming that as the people naming the Xbox. Xbox Series X. God, don't even get me started. I can't wait for people to start trading in consoles or asking for consoles. Yeah, I got an Xbox One S. Is it the Series S or is it the S? It's the white one.
Oh god.
I wish I was joking.
Oh yeah, no, I hear you. At my job, some of the stuff we get, you're just left scratching your head, and you're just like, okay, all right, whatever. What do we got to do to get you out of here quick? Because I can only take so much of this crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, cool. Well, what else do you have for pop culture news, Eric?
All right, I got one more that I think would be of interest to our viewers. Certainly, we have a lot of folks that are Orville fans, and a lot of people have been wondering what Seth MacFarlane's been up to. This is from Bleeding Cool, and it says Orville creator Seth MacFarlane is going to war with NBCU. So, for folks that don't remember, Seth MacFarlane made a huge deal with NBC Universal. And a lot of people were speculating that might lead to a cancellation of the Orville. And of course, there's been recent speculation about that has mostly been debunked about possible cancellation of the Orville, that the third season might be its last. But this story is about what is Seth actually doing for NBC Universal? And the answer is very surprising to me. He is actually doing an adaptation of The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. Some of you may have read the books. I remember them as a very popular and very well regarded TV miniseries, two TV miniseries actually, that were quite epic in scale at the time. I still remember watching these things vividly as a child. But that's what he's doing. He is actually making an adaptation of The Winds of War and War of Remembrance for NBC Universal. And I have to say, I never would have saw this coming from Seth MacFarlane. Had either one of you heard about this?
I'd only heard about it within the last few days because it's been getting a good little bit of press. But yeah, prior to that, I hadn't heard anything about this at all.
It doesn't seem like something Seth would be doing. You know what I mean? It really surprised me.
Well, yeah, because you would think of him obviously as more comedy because that's what he's known for. So, But there were some episodes of Orville that steered pretty heavy into drama and dealt with some pretty heavy themes while still managing to see the humor, in certain moments. But there was some pretty heavy stuff, in the last season of the Orville. So, I mean, he's a talented guy, so I bet he could, I I feel like that he would be able to handle this material because I remember seeing those back in the day too. But we'll have to just wait and see. We'll see. I would not have thought this would be the first big project they would announce coming from him. You would think it would be something that was more kind of obviously within his wheelhouse, or the things that people think of him more for. Because again, that goes back to that idea. That's why you buy a brand. That's why you buy a name, because people know what they're going to get. They know what to expect. And then the hope is that over time, they trust that, so they'll just follow that brand wherever it goes. So in that sense, who knows how well this thing will technically, work out for him on the long run, because to me, depending upon how they approach the material, theoretically, it could be kind of going against his brand a little bit here and there in times. But like I said, we'll just have to see what they do with it.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if he's getting over his head a little bit. And I'll just say it because I remember both of those miniseries growing up. And they have an absolutely epic scale to those stories. I mean, this is World War II. They get right into it. It addresses the Holocaust. They talk a lot about Hitler as a person, even, you know what I mean, and go beyond some of the caricatures and things like that. It's a really deep story, and I remember it having a big impact on me as a kid and learning a lot about World War II just from watching both of those miniseries. And I think they're still very well regarded. I don't know if they're available anywhere right now where you can stream them or anything like that, but I would definitely advise people to check it out. To me, in a lot of ways, this would be like if they said they were going to be doing Shogun again. It's like at that level. If they said that they were going to redo Shogun, I'd be kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that,
Yeah, and it gets to the point too where it's sort of like, well, how do you do that? I mean, obviously you can shoot some of it green screen, you can shoot some of it, on set, because some of the structures and such still technically exist. But yeah, it does get into that weird area. And I hadn't quite thought of it in that way, Eric. That's an interesting point to make, that it's almost like this concept of we're just going to remake Shogun.
Right.
Because there's something magical about Shogun. That's why Shogun works. It's like it's not just Richard Chamberlain. It's also Richard Chamberlain interacting with John Rhys Davies. It's not just John Rhys Davies. It's I forget the name of the actor. It's the guy who played the Cardinal. You know what I mean? Like, and then there's the actress that played the translator. And it's like there's a chemistry there, that sort of that intangible they sometimes refer to, the magic of the movies, even though I know it was a TV, miniseries event, there's magic there. Toshiro Mifune, he isn't, I don't know if Toshiro's still with us or not. I think he might have passed. Let me double check. But again, it gets back into that same idea. It's like it was so magical having Toshiro Mifune, be able to play, Toranaga. Yeah, that's crazy. Now that you bring that up, Eric, I don't know how you approach this material, because if you would attribute it or liken it to, remaking Shogun, like, I don't see how you do that.
Yeah, I remember them in the same vein because they came out around the same time. At least one of them did, because there's a big gap between the two different stories. There was actually a big gap in television between the two different stories. In fact, a lot of the cast changed because of the huge gap between the two of them. But like I said, I just remember growing up on them and just finding them. I saw one of them. I think the first one I saw fairly recently. Within the last few years, it was on television or on one of the streaming services or something. And I watched it from beginning to end. And the first one I didn't remember as well because I was much younger. I remember the second one because the second one deals directly with the Holocaust because one of the characters is actually arrested by the Nazis and actually becomes a victim of the Holocaust. But in the first one, all that stuff is just being set up. Like she's basically trapped in Italy as the war starts. There's a lot of intrigue. She's got a husband who's in the military that's trying to find her. The main character is like an admiral in the Navy. It's all this stuff going on. So I just remember watching that not too long ago, and it's a really pretty epic story. So I'm really wondering how they're going to adapt this, and also how they're going to adapt it in today's world, because there's some really interesting stuff in that. Like they don't, like I said, they don't treat Hitler as a caricature in that movie. They actually have some really kind of stuff that I don't know you can get away with saying, today, where they talk about, Hitler was actually pretty intelligent, really cunning, and someone really to be a force to be reckoned with. There were some scenes in there that show that this was a real kind of a mad genius. And I don't know if you could get away with that today.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I actually, I don't think many people here in the Retro Rogues know, but I'm part of a tabletop sort of like war gaming group. We're in the process of playing War in Europe, and I actually play Italy. And I've been very much watching and steeping myself into a lot of World War II stuff, whether it's actual historical stuff or movies that, for example, like the other gentleman I play with actually recommend. And for those people that are curious, a film that's recently become available that's interesting is A Bridge Too Far. I'd never seen it before, but it's got Sean Connery and Gene Hackman and Michael Caine, and it's got Maximilian Schell. Like, it's got a really interesting cast. Robert Redford's in it, but that's actually shown up to watch for free on a lot of streaming services right now. Since we're talking about sort of this time period, I thought it'd be interesting, worth mentioning, that there's this film that's quite highly regarded among World War II buffs called A Bridge Too Far. That's on a lot of services that you can actually watch and check out, because it wasn't really available, I think, to the level it is right now until just recently. So that's kind of a weird comment on Seth MacFarlane, remaking these productions. But there's my 2 cents. If you haven't checked it out, A Bridge Too Far, it's on a lot of streaming services right now.
Very cool.
Awesome. Do you have anything else for streaming wars, or pop culture news, or are we good to go to?
No, I think we've kept folks in suspense long enough, so we got to take on the big story of the week. All
right. Well, give me just a second to get the graphic up, and then we will.
By the way, Bobby, that's exactly what I said when Dave first told me about this group, because we talked about it the other day. Bobby says Axis and Allies is a great World War II style board game. That's what I asked him, because I wasn't familiar with it. I was like, Dave, is that anything like Axis and Allies? That game that you're playing?
It's sort of like a real time kind of game. I don't know how the best way to describe it. Like right now, I think we have it's somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 pieces on the board. The actual map itself takes up an enormous area. When we get together and we game, it's actually an all-day affair. It starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it typically doesn't end until 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night.
I was about to say 5 or 6 in the morning.
No, not that. Not quite that bad. Not quite that bad. But no, this most recent gaming session, I was actually attacking Belford, which is actually a town in France. It's actually towards the coast, and not on the coast, but towards the coast. And because obviously, since I'm playing Italy, I'm a German ally essentially. And so, but the thing that was really crazy is I was attacking this air base with essentially biplanes, because for reasons that no one can explain to me, Italy, because they did really well in a previous conflict with biplanes, decided, this is good. We'll just go with these biplanes. So I basically had what I kept describing as 450 bicycles with people holding bombs over the side, attempting to take out a French air base. And I did pretty well considering what I was using, but it was kind of a weird scenario. It's like, we're just trying. Literally, it's like I'm just trying to take out this one air base, and it's a real struggle because some of these planes basically historically they were not too far advanced from World War I technology. A lot of nations at the time didn't think that they needed to really worry with advancing a lot of their warfare technology. And that's kind of what gave, Germany kind of its upper hand, is that, they went pretty far into it, So I don't know. It's a very interesting game. I've actually been creating custom shirts actually for members of my group. So Eric saw the picture of the one that I was wearing that actually has, like, on the sleeve, it's actually got the Air General emblems and stuff. There was some I haven't had a chance to talk to Eric about it too much, but there was some brief discussion about, do you think people would be interested in, like we're doing this here, maybe like an hour-long show just talking about tabletop war games, because there's not I guess a lot out there. A lot of people are doing D&D, a lot of people are doing Magic the Gathering, a lot of people are doing other things, but there's not really stuff for that sort of strategy, people that are like, really into Risk, type of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe we'll do something with it. It would be interesting. But that's kind of cool that you called that out, Bobby, because when I talk about I'm playing this game and I tell other people about it, they either haven't heard about it or they go, "Wow, it's going to take you 3 years to play that game." Those are the two reactions I get. I've never heard of it, or wow, it's going to take you 3 years to play that game.
Please tell me the person that picked Germany dresses up as Red Skull sometimes.
No, he's too much of an actual real history nut to do that. No, unfortunately he does not. I think the person in the group that would dress as the Red Skull for comedic effect one session would be me.
You and I are two sides of a coin.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. Wow, we're way off topic. So let's set up Streaming Wars. So here in the Streaming Wars segment, we talk about anything interesting that we think you would like to talk about in the world of the Streaming Wars. Now, you'll be asking yourself, Dave, what do you mean by Streaming Wars? By Streaming Wars, I'm talking about anything that's happening in a stream near you. No, wait, I'm sorry. Let me back that up. We got to stop the fishing analogies. There's too much confusion there. So what I mean by Streaming Wars is I'm actually talking about not live, but video streaming. We're talking about a lot of those services. Obviously, all of us are very familiar with, whether we're talking about Netflix, whether we're talking about Hulu, whether we're talking about some of the free services, where you're talking about Pluto, or even some of the newer ones, such as Peacock, HBO Max, Quibi, because they keep running commercials for that, even though I'm not watching it. There's all these amazing streaming services, and obviously the various conflicts that are caused because of what's happening in this space. So that's what we mean by Streaming Wars. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up first for this episode's installment of the Streaming Wars?
I think we just want to talk about Time Warner, right? We want to talk about AT&T and the massive shake, right?
Yeah, let me go ahead. I'll pull up my link. I'm sorry. We had discussed how we were going to do this, and then I kind of went off topic here.
Well, this story has had huge repercussions. So for people that are not familiar with it, there's been a huge shakeup at AT&T. Basically, the Time Warner division has had a massive shakeup. There have been tons and tons of layoffs. What's funny, when this story first started to break, Dave and I started talking about one of the first articles that came out, and I guess I jinxed it, right, Dave? Because I actually said, it's funny because the first article when this first came out, because we said we're definitely going to talk about this. The first article that came out didn't say anything about DC, didn't say anything about DC Universe. Everything was about these other divisions in Time Warner that were experiencing a bloodbath. And that's the first thing I said to Dave was like, wow, there's like no DC news. What's going on with DC? Well, Dave, you have the answer for us, don't you, about what's going on at
Yeah,
DC in the aftermath of these. Again, this is a massive thing going on throughout the Time Warner division of AT&T. And it seems to me that it finally trickled down to DC.
yeah, it definitely did. Let me. This is coming from the Hollywood Reporter. I'm just going to read some of this, and then we'll just kind of get into the discussion, basically. So this is on their part of their segment that they actually call the Heat Vision, which usually covers like superhero type news or comic industry type news. And it says and again, apologies everyone. This is going to be a bit of a downer conversation. DC Comics, DC Universe hit by major layoffs. This story is actually from August 10th, so it's a couple days old. This is by Graham McMillan and Boris Kitt. And it basically says the majority of staff of the streaming service DC Universe has been laid off, as has editor-in-chief Bob Harris and multiple other executives on the publishing side. Monday's Warner Media layoffs have affected a significant number of high-level figures at comic book powerhouse DC, multiple sources tell the Hollywood Reporter. Among those said to be losing their positions are editor-in-chief Bob Harris, senior VP of Publishing Strategy and Support Services, Hank, I never learned the right way to say his name, Canals, VP of Market Creative Services, Jonah Whelan, who's actually a recent addition. He hasn't been there that long. I think he's only been there since 2019. Jonah Whelan is who actually started CBR.com, for those of us that are kind of been, around the, comics, internet news cycles for some time. VP of Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy, and one of my former bosses, Bobby Chase, Senior Story Editor, and another one of my former bosses who I considered a friend, Brian Cunningham, and Executive Editor Mark Doyle, who oversaw the rollout of the Black Label graphic novels, and Jim Lee remains as the CEO of the CCO, or Chief Creative Officer, which I'm beginning to wonder how much longer that's honestly going to last. Roughly 1/3 of DC's editorial ranks are being laid off, according to sources. Insiders also say the majority of the staff of the streaming service DC Universe has been laid off, a move that has been widely expected at Warner Media as Warner Media shifts to focus to new streaming service HBO Max. DC Universe was DOA as soon as the AT&T merger happened, said one source. DC Universe launched in May of 2018 and is home to live-action series such as Doom Patrol, Titans, and Stargirl, as well as animated offerings including Young Justice and Harley Quinn. Some of those shows have now started to stream on HBO Max, which Eric and we previously talked about it, and Eric had theorized that this might be the beginning. I had said for a while I thought DC Universe was going to go out, but I didn't expect it to be like this, because it's not just DC Universe that's being affected by this. It's DC Comics as a whole. DC Direct has basically been destroyed. If you've enjoyed those fun action figures and like a lot of that new stuff they just unveiled, like the cool Todd McFarlane, like Batman sculpture and all these fun things they've been doing over the years, it's done. DC Direct is done. Also, and that's what they're actually getting to, is also victim of the layoffs, DC Direct, the company's in-house merchandise and collectible manufacturer. The division has been shuttered after 22 years. Another move that was rumored when Warner Brothers Consumer Products began taking a more active role in DC merchandising. A DC spokesperson declined to comment on the changes, which come less than 2 weeks before the planned August 22nd online event, DC Fandom. That's the real kicker. That's the real kicker, which is set to showcase stars from DC's film, TV, and comic book worlds. That, to me, is the big kicker. Fandom is about to happen, and you do this before Fandom hits? Like, talk about a public relations nightmare. And then here's the part that this story doesn't report that I've read other places, and I got to be careful I don't get myself in legal trouble with some of the stuff I want to say, because I'm pretty upset about some of this. Supposedly, I'm reading this rumor in multiple sources that the guy who's in charge of this, I'm not going to use his name, but the guy who's in charge of this restructuring that's happening over at DC, said he wants to get someone who's experienced in esports to manage the DC Comics division.
What?
Friggin' esports? What in the hell does esports have to do with comic books?
I swear to God, if fucking Ninja is the new head of DC Comics, I'm going to write them off.
This whole thing has and just so everyone knows, I haven't had a lot of contact with a lot of the people that I used to work with at DC for like a little while, because about the time that the merger happened, it was just like what happened over at Marvel. So let me give you guys a little bit of history, okay? And this is my own personal history. So these are all my own personal experiences, and my opinions do not reflect those of Retro Rogues Live, Bad Vibe Productions, anyone else associated with anything that's going on right here. They're just my own personal opinions, okay? I, once upon a time, was working with Marvel Comics. Scott Clark and I were developing several different things, one of which I'm just going to go ahead and put out there was a Silver Surfer series that we were developing with one of the editors over there. They were very interested in the pitch idea. I mentioned this previously on the show, I think once before. For a lot of years, I didn't like talking about it in open discussion because I didn't know if I'd get in trouble for talking about it. But we'd been developing a Silver Surfer series. We've been doing some concept design stuff, and I was very excited about it. And then all of a sudden, our contacts, our editorial contacts, suddenly kind of went dark all of a sudden. And then prior to this happening, like, you know, we were considered part of the regular talent roster. We just finished working on X-Men, sort of the product. Scott had just finished doing a big major story that ran in Hulk family. And so we were thinking that we were going to be with Marvel for quite some time. And all of a sudden, all our editorial contacts went dark. Like, they wouldn't respond to any of our messages. They wouldn't respond to emails, nothing. They wouldn't respond to phone calls. It's like, well, that's weird. And then the news came out that they'd basically been bought by Disney. And then basically at that point, moving forward, we never were able to get a hold of anyone at Marvel. Part of the reason, they say this old adage, if you want to work at Marvel, work at DC. If you want to work at DC, work at Marvel. Because the idea is, when one door closes, another opens. Most people just go from one side of the street to the other. You know, and that way the comics industry, for lack of a better term, can sometimes be considered a little too inside baseball, a little too incestuous, whatever. True. But the thing of it is, for me, I never got to experience that. Because when Disney bought Marvel, I was cut off. No one would answer any messages from me at all. Period, about anything. Well, a little while ago, I got the same thing over at DC. And I thought it was kind of weird. And then it was like a really long delay before I got a royalty check. And I was like, what is going on? Something's happening. But I didn't know exactly what it was. I talked kind of vaguely about it with a few people. I know I mentioned it to Eric because I thought it was weird. But I didn't know that it necessarily meant anything, right? Well, then, lo and behold, here comes this bombshell. So I don't know how long people have known this was coming. You know, usually when you get laid off from a job, you never know it's coming. It always seems like it comes out of left field. A lot of the people that have been basically dismissed or sent away from DC Comics has been their job and kind of like their work home for a very long time. There's a lot of really good people that were basically shown the door over essentially a restructuring because another company absorbed another company. Because some of these decisions don't make any sense. You know, me, myself, I'm trying to build a little small cottage industry, you know, because I like to make things, you know, I like to design things, right? Like, I want to continue to create comics. I want to design T-shirts. I want to do, you know, I want to make little figurine character things. Like, you know, I want to create, in a sense, at one point, what they had managed to build over at DC. Because at one point at DC, with their, you know, with their resources of Time Warner, you know, through DC Direct, they had the ability to design and sell all these amazing things over the years that they've sold. Now, I know some of it financially doesn't sometimes make sense. You know, sometimes you make a bad bet on something. But for the fans, you know, it was amazing to see these things brought to life. And I know a lot of people supported them because I know I bought a lot of that stuff. You know, I know my brother bought a lot of that stuff. I know a lot of us have.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, maybe financially, business wise, this makes sense because of whatever they have planned to do. And I felt really bad about everyone, but I didn't really think this was a bunch of horse shit until I heard they want to get an esports guy to manage DC Comics. And I'm like, okay, so what you did is you showed everyone the door before you give this job to some friend of yours who comes from an esports background. That's what it sounds like. I hate to say that, but that's what it sounds like. And it sucks. It really sucks. Um, the whole goal originally when they reorganized DC and tried to bring it into a tighter integration with Warner Brothers was in order to help Warner Brothers take advantage of the various properties and the licenses that DC controlled, one. And then the other second goal, too, was to hopefully try and have it where they wouldn't create another Steel movie. They wouldn't create another Catwoman movie. Like another thing that was so tone deaf to what the fans liked that it never had a chance of being successful at the box office or clicking long term to kind of become a cult hit because it's too outside of the box for fans to really latch onto it or appreciate it. You know what I mean? It's too weird, right? But it seems like to me that all along it was to pave the way for what happened. And if someone had told me before that the writing was on the wall for DC, or that DC could be heading the same direction that Marvel is heading, where we've talked and reported on the show previously about the idea that Marvel might even be looking at getting out of the idea of publishing comics at some point coming up, and maybe they'll just license it. Maybe they'll just license their properties. They'll just license their brands, the same way that King Features, handles Flash Gordon and the Phantom, for example. Not to pick on them, but just as an example. They own and control it. They license it to other people, but they don't really actively produce anything anymore. And I would have never thought that DC was headed that direction until I saw this. They sent a lot of very talented, creative, professional people out into the street because I have this weird feeling that they're just looking to bring on some people to basically manage these brands. I think that's where DC's headed. I think it's unfortunate. So, and pretty much every contact I had at DC's gone. There's no one left. They're all gone. So, it's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling because I haven't been like a part of DC in quite some time, but I took offense to this and it kind of hurt. And as I saw, some of my professional friends reacting to what's going on. And I could tell something was coming because there's a lot of long-term freelancers who've done a lot of work for DC that have been an important part, not just of a lot of storylines, but kind of the backbone. Like, people who provide like important services, like coloring services, whatever. And I've seen them be getting less work and less work and less work. And it's getting to the point I'm like, okay, I think something's happening. Something's coming. But I don't think I expected something to this degree. So my reaction was pretty shocked, pretty upset. Even though we speculated and I kind of called that I thought DC Universe would be the first casualty of the streaming wars. That was kind of tongue-in-cheek and fun, but you feel bad because, people are going to lose their jobs. But I didn't realize DC as a whole was going to be affected to the level that it has been affected. This is pretty extreme. I never imagined it would be this bad. So that's my reaction. How did you react to this, Eric?
Well, like I said at first, and by the way, Bobby mentions esports and comics, and he's got the little concerned emoji there. Yeah, those are not two things that necessarily naturally go together. And I hadn't heard that aspect of the story. I hadn't heard that rumor that was what they were looking to do. But when we were talking about this story, I thought we were just going to be talking mostly about Warner Brothers, about Time Warner and all the big shakeups that were happening over there, because those all happened first. I think folks have to understand that context, that they got hit first, and they had a bunch of layoffs, and they had a bunch of their CEOs fired, rearranged, all that kind of stuff. So Warner Brothers took the hit initially. And, my feeling was, I've said it on the show, I knew they had to do something, because I could see what was going on with HBO Max and the fact that they were having this weird arrangement of trying to share content with DC Universe, and it didn't make any sense to me. I just didn't know what was going on. And so as the story kind of developed, over time, it was only recently that I saw what was actually happening with DC Comics. And at that point, I was like, wow, I was really kind of shocked. I can understand the shakeup at DC Universe, but I couldn't understand the shakeup at DC Comics.
Yeah, I don't. It's just weird. I'm actually in the process. I'm actually pulling up the story where they talk about the esports thing. So I was going to share that too. So tell me, Ronnie, what's your reaction? Try not to have too many profanities. I've already done that myself, but not too many profanities. We did try to keep it kind of a little bit of a family show, even though this show is not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised.
Yeah, sorry, that was just it. That threw me through a loop. It was just like, I don't understand esports and comics. That's just no. But my initial reaction to this was just shock. I mean, good Lord. I mean, AT&T basically just treated. Basically, AT&T is George R.R. Martin, and DC Comics is Game of Thrones and all the characters you enjoy and love. Basically, it's like they just cleaned house. Everybody just gone. This was DC's version of the Red Wedding.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it.
But no, when DC Direct, like when I heard that they were gone, I was like, that really sucks. And I've purchased a lot of stuff from them over the years, but I kind of saw it coming when McFarlane got the toy license.
Yeah, I did think that was weird too. But I, at the same point, it's like McFarlane's had a lot of important licenses in the past, so I didn't read too much into that. Yeah, but I did think that was kind of an unusual move. And then I have over here, I pulled this up. This is over at the Beat, or the Comics Beat. This is Heidi McDonald. She does a lot of interesting comics coverage and reporting. She's been doing it since forever. It says that DC's new esports publisher, Pam Liffer's plans and more fallout from Bloodbath Monday. This was actually, this is from yesterday. So this is a day ago. And so I'm going to read just briefly a little bit about this, but you can find this over at the Beat. But it just says the comics industry woke up with an overwhelming collective sense of sorrow this morning as people absorbed the news that as much as 1/3 of DC Comics editorial staff was laid off yesterday amid huge cuts at Warner Media in general. DC was hard hit, losing almost an entire level of editorial executives, but many familiar industry figures were also let go. As scattered as people are due to COVID-19, the comics community felt yesterday intensely. Well, anyhow, we'll skip down. So it says, but what does it mean and where will DC go? Some other news and reports before I get to what I'm hearing. So this is where I'd heard reported several different places. As reported by comicbook.com and confirmed by my sources, DC will hire a new business manager to run the publishing side of things. While no one knows much about this person, he is said to come from the world of esports. This sounds like a horrific fit on paper, especially after Comics Hot Stove League spent years trying to figure out who would succeed the Didio League two-headed publishing setup. I often guess it would be a Warner's suit, but again, not like this. I hope the situation is better than it sounds on paper. It's not exactly clear what Jim Lee Tyler's position will be, but reportedly he will oversee DC's liaison with other Warner Media divisions. This is actually a job he was already doing, technically speaking, as DC's chief creative officer. I'm assuming he'll continue in that role. So to me, it sounds like he'll no longer have any hand in the day-to-day publishing decisions. Yeah, this whole thing's a mess, y'all. But you can read this over at the beat. But yeah, I'd heard this reported multiple places that they're going to get some kind of esports person to do it. I don't know. I don't understand that logic. But there you go. But in order to keep it relevant to streaming wars, it's important to remember DC Universe, basically, it's done.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Now, you saw the writing on the wall with that when you were talking about that they no longer had the yearly subscription option, because obviously they didn't plan to be around for the next year. So you no longer had the option to subscribe for a year.
That's true. Yeah. And then, so here's my big impassioned plea for those of you that are watching or listening right now. You know, those comic creators, those artists, those writers, those various people that you enjoy, who were at DC, who were at Marvel, who were at wherever. Okay, with everything that's going on, the best way to support them right now, in my humble opinion, is directly. If they have an independent comic title that they're trying to get off the ground, they've got a Kickstarter thing going, go support that. You know, whatever it is that they're doing, that they're trying to get off the ground, they got a Patreon, they got a whatever. If you want to help them out, if you love their work, find a way to support them directly. Because as we're seeing right now with these mergers and these different things that are going on, there's more than just DC and Marvel being affected. You know, we covered it just briefly on a previous episode, but for example, like, look at the damage that's been done to Dark Horse over the years. You know, Dark Horse used to have the Star Wars license, they had the Predators license, they had the Aliens license. They had their other stuff that they did too. You know, they published Concrete, they published 300. You know, they've published a lot of important work over the years, but the backbone that kind of helped and kept Dark Horse kind of afloat with a lot of time was the licensed properties. Licensed properties is what keeps a lot of people going. Well, you know, they just lost Alien and Predator. You know, it's going over to Marvel, and then it gets weird. It's like, well, is Marvel still going to be publishing comics? Like, what does that even mean? You know, so the best way to support those people whose work that you've loved and enjoyed, whether they're a writer, whether they're an artist, whether it's a team of people that work together, when you see them cobbling together a project that's on Kickstarter, support it. That's the best way you can support them. You know, support those independent creators, you know, and help get them, you know, help stay solvent, you know, in the midst of everything that's going on. That is going to be the best thing that you can do. For example, a lot of the editors, when they moved from New York to Burbank, some of the editors went and worked at different places, Scholastic or wherever. So they were still out there kind of working, you know, but you don't see the creative output out of them that you saw like when they were at DC, for example. But you look around and you do see some people still out there hustling or still out there producing. And they're still putting out comics and stuff. So that's the big thing I learned from stuff like this. The big thing I learned from stuff like this is, if there's a writer, there's an artist, there's a creative professional whose work you enjoy, support them directly if you can. That's it. That's the best way you can help them to continue to, you know, take care of their families and also continue to create. You know, that's going to be the best thing long term. That's the thing at the end of the day will keep the comics industry healthy in some form and continue to move it forward as the big companies, you know, dismantle and reorganize and do whatever the heck it is that they're trying to do.
I think all this stuff's going to end up giving rise to a lot more to the indie area side of comics and everything. I think they're going to see way more creators and like even established creators just moving to that due to all this, you know, malarkey going on within Marvel and DC, which hopefully this will breathe new life into comics and also breathe a new life of originality.
I think it will. I think over time it will. You know, in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity. You know, so Um, the trick is going to be, I think, for those professionals who find themselves on the opposite side, is to just find that passion project or find that thing that you want to do, because now's the time to do it. You know, I didn't realize that I had the stuff inside me creatively to do a lot of the things that I've been doing over the last few years, until I almost lost the ability to draw. You know, like, it takes something like that that really shakes you to your core, that causes you to question what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then it causes you to think creatively and move in different directions, and maybe grow or do things that normally you wouldn't do. And those are the things that cause the breakthrough. You know, those are the things that help you to push through to the other side, and to grow and become a more well-rounded person, as well as a more well-rounded creative professional as well. But I do think, as I see things like this with all this stuff that's going on, because there's all kinds of chaos in the comics industry right now. We're barely scratching the surface of the chaos that's going on right now. But the best advice, the one thing I would tell anyone who's listening, is just, if there's a creator whose work that you love, whether they're a writer, artist, it doesn't matter. If they have a passion project that they're doing, if you see it's on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever, now is the time to support them directly. Now's the time to do it. You know, we need to start looking at the creators and what they're doing and support that, than necessarily just supporting just a brand. You know, brands are fun. You know, I hope Kirby Tees one day is a brand, right? But these companies get to a certain point where it's not even about brand anymore. It's about something else. I don't pretend to understand the decisions that led to what happened over at DC. I could understand reshuffling and showing a couple people the door. That happens every time a company reorganizes. I've been laid off many times in my professional career, so I completely get that, but the level of this is something else. And I feel like this was motivated by more than just money. So I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, that's what I got for Streaming Wars. Big O downer.
Well, it's a big story, and as I mentioned before, when it first started breaking, it was all about what was happening over at Warner Brothers, and they took a big hit as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out as well, when you're talking about the film division and talking about all these movies that people are looking forward to, and that even includes the Snyder Cut. Could this have some effect on that? This is obviously meant to have huge repercussions for HBO Max, which, by the way, I think they needed to do something, because HBO Max is really not making a lot of waves right now. I don't think they are a winner in the streaming wars right now. I think the big thing they have is the Snyder Cut, and the Snyder Cut doesn't exist, at least not yet. So they had to do something. I'm not saying they should have done this, but they had to do something, and I think somebody realized that, the CEO in particular. And I don't understand how the power structure works exactly there. Like, I don't know how much influence, whoever's at the head of, Time Warner or whatever they're calling it now, because actually it's called something different. I think it's like Warner Brothers something, or it's not called Time Warner anymore. But then that guy answers to whoever's in charge of AT&T, technically. So it's kind of an interesting thing going on there with that dynamic. Who's telling who what? I don't know. I don't know at that level how that works. But I can tell you, just from me having a small business and enough sense in my head, if I was the guy over AT&T, I would have been saying, we've got major problems and we need to do something, because this isn't working. I can see what you guys are doing. It's not working because you're messing up the brand. There's too much confusion, And so something had to happen. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of this, is because they're smart enough to realize we got to do something. The question always becomes, well, did they have to do this? Is this the way to do it? And like, we have a comment from Jane. She talks about, she said, he must work really cheap, meaning the esport guy. And I'll tell you, he probably doesn't. But I could see the scenario where Dave is saying this could be somebody's buddy. You know what I mean? And somebody's buddy, because we talked about before that AT&T wants to sell Warner Interactive. And let's just say that scenario, if this is esports guy, he's friends with the CEO, and they're getting rid of Warner Interactive, which would be a perfect place for the esports guy to go.
Yeah.
But we don't have that. We want to get rid of that. We don't want that. So where can we put you? Can stuff like that happen? Absolutely it can. That's pure speculation. But can something like that happen? Absolutely it can.
Well, and I keep talking about the real value, the real value in my mind anyway of the DC Universe app was the comics library that they were maintaining, because you could go on there and read decades and decades worth of really great material. There's legacy there, there's history there. The things that built DC into the brand it is, that's what it is. It's those stories, it's those characters. And that's the real value of the DC Universe app at the end of the day, was the fact that you had access to all that material. Well, then it goes, it's like, does that material roll over to Comixology? Is it part of their Comixology Unlimited plan? Like, why isn't someone trying to find a way to roll that into HBO Max?
That's right? What I would do. If I was the head of AT&T, I would say make that happen, because that'll make us unique. That'll make HBO Max unique.
Yeah, and you go from this point. Yeah, and you watch the HBO Watchmen, right? And then right after that, there's a little thing. It's like, click here to read some of the comics that inspired, or click here to read the further adventures. Like that was what I was always told was what all of this restructuring was supposed to lead to. And I keep seeing moves that sometimes like they're pushing in the opposite direction. I feel like, well, this is more about money and power. This is not about restructuring and leverage and brand. This is about something else. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it or seeing things that aren't there, or ghosts in the mist. But it's just one of those.
I know you're big on unsolved mysteries. I know that. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Well, yeah. So this is the big topic, I thought, for streaming wars, because it has such huge implications when you look at obviously how it affects HBO Max. Obviously, the fact that it does look like DC Universe will actually, in fact, be the first true casualty of the streaming wars. I just didn't expect it to go down like this, because I forget when. There was another service we were talking about, Eric. We were saying, it's like, well, these people might actually be the first. But no. It's still going to be DC Universe. They're still going to be the first major casualty of the streaming wars. So I guess we were right. Kind of sucks to be right about that, but we were right.
Yes, indeed. It does suck to be right sometimes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Do you have anything else, Eric, for streaming wars? I know we talked about we were probably just going to focus on this.
Yeah, we just want to focus on this. I think this is a big story. I think we'll probably even be talking about repercussions from this story next week. So.
Yeah, I think we will be.
I'm curious if there's going to be like really huge announcements for HBO Max on Fandom. Maybe that's just why all this stuff happened. But still, it's really terrible that I really think they shouldn't have fired all the editorial staff and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that they shouldn't have done, especially right before Fandom, like y'all are saying, because that's going to bring a lot of heat on them during live questionnaires. But then again, everything's pre-recorded, so for Fandom.
That's the thing. If Fandom was a live event, boy, did they just create a mess for themselves.
Yeah.
Holy cow, did they create a mess for themselves. But, if they take the chicken whatever way out, and don't do it live, you know what I mean? Then, yeah, they don't have to answer to anyone then. They just kind of put it up, and if the trolls and whoever's mad, they just leave their comments, and, maybe someone reads it and maybe someone doesn't. It doesn't really matter.
Allow comments. That's assuming they even allow comments. So
I mean, I'm of the opinion now that whatever the original intention with DC Fandom was, it's actually been derailed for quite some time, and no one's been aware of it. But they already announced it; they're committed to do it. They've already filmed everything and put it together. But I would be willing to bet you that whatever the original intent of the DC fandom was, now it's just sort of like a loss. I think they're doing it because they said they were going to do it, and everything's ready. So they'll still put the stuff up for people to watch it because it's only available for a certain period of time, and it's going to come down. So they'll put it up, people will watch it. They'll gauge the metrics on a few things to see. It's like, well, should we still do this or should we still do that? They'll use that to make a couple of decisions. But I bet whatever the original intention was with it and what it was supposed to be about and what it's going to wind up being in the end are two completely different things.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that they could be looking into leaning into a heavy publication schedule with the Black Label and all these other things that they were doing when you look at this. Like how are they supposed to do what they were going to do with literally the staff that they have left? It looks like a skeleton staff to me. It's like, well, a skeleton staff would be great just to sit there and, manage these licensed properties.
Yeah.
Not spearhead, families of titles and figure out story directions and all the things that the editorial staff did. And I've not always been in, lockstep with what they've wanted to do. I've gone on record before that I tried to talk Bobby Chase out of bringing somebody onto a book. It didn't do any good, but I've not always agreed with what editorial wanted to do. But still, it's like this just, I don't know, as a longtime DC fan, this was hard. This was hard to read. And then when I saw everyone who was affected, it was even harder because it's like, I know a lot of these people, and that's, I was just like, wow. And then it was like, oh, well, this is why everyone's gone silent. This is why no one's getting back to me on silly little things because they have more important things they're dealing with. So,
yeah.
Well, if we think that's good, because I've noticed the Rogues Gallery has gotten kind of quiet on us.
It's a weighty subject.
Yeah, maybe we should segue over to Spaceballs.
Sounds good to me.
It's getting heavy. Now I gotta leave.
I see how it is. Well, I know it's a lot later for you there. Don't stay up too late.
Yeah, it's 11:40 here. It's almost midnight.
Oh, wow.
Let me get the graphic up here real quick. I was over here just reacting and thinking about that story and not paying attention to what I'm supposed to be doing. Man, yeah, it's just crazy. Let's see. Come on. My computer's been giving me little issues every once in a while when we're switching over. I don't know why. All right. So here now, I can never remember this, Eric. But what is it we call it? It's a Rogue Retrospective. Is that what it is?
Rogues Retrospective.
Rogues Retrospective. I don't know why it's so hard for me to remember that. I really struggle with that. All right, so let me pull up just some brief little information here to make sure I don't misspeak. Okay, so here in our Rogues Retrospective, we're going to be talking about from 1987. We're going to be talking about Spaceballs. Spaceballs is directed by Mel Brooks. I knew that without reading it, but it's here in front of me anyway. Screenplay is by Mel Brooks, Ronnie Graham, and Thomas Meehan. Of course, in the cast, we've got Daphne Zuniga, obviously Mel Brooks, Rick Moranis, Bill Pullman, John Candy, Joan Rivers, Dick Van Patten, and just a whole slew of comedic actors and actresses that I know a lot of us actually grew up watching in various productions. Like, John Candy and I was actually, Rick Moranis, they were in, like, it seemed like almost everything I used to watch. So I'm going to read the summary here real quick, and then we'll get in. I'll set it up just real briefly. So, in a distant galaxy, planet Spaceball has depleted its air supply, leaving its citizens reliant on a product called Perrier, In desperation, Spaceballs leader President Scrooge, which is played by Mel Brooks, orders the evil Dark Helmet, played by Rick Moranis, to kidnap Princess Vespa, Daphne Zuniga, of the oxygen-rich planet Druidia. Druidia? Sure, I'm not pronouncing that right.
It's like druid. So it's like
Druid.
Druidia, right? Because it's supposed to be like a druid.
Yeah,
Druid,
yeah.
you know.
Well, obviously, Spaceballs is a big Star Wars spoof. I think that's pretty apparent when you actually watch it. It was obviously sold as a big, Star Wars spoof. And so, just to briefly set it up. So, in order to do a retrospective, what you have to first talk about is how you first heard about the film, your initial reactions, right, to when you originally saw the film. And then, hopefully I know Eric and I we have rewatched Spaceballs actually recently for the show. And then we're going to talk about how we feel about the film today, having seen it in a current context. So, Eric, I'll go ahead and let you go first. How did you first hear about Spaceballs? That sounds like a loaded question.
So basically, I remember when it first came out, most of my friends went and saw it in the theater when it first came out. I did not. What happened was, back when I was a kid, every summer you had this option to buy these discounted movie tickets. And the way that system worked, I don't think they do that anymore. They had movies that had come out within the last year or two, and they would have matinees, and basically you could go watch the movie at a pretty cheap price, because you can get like a sheet of these tickets. Every summer you get like 10 tickets, and you could use them for whatever movies you wanted in this summer movie program. The idea was that kids could go to movies during the summer. A lot of parents would just drop their kids off. My parents weren't like that, but a lot of parents would. They would just drop their kids off to watch a movie, pick them up later, that kind of a thing. And there were usually movies that were out, anywhere from, about a year mark, maybe a little bit more. Sometimes there'd be some older films, but usually they were films that were out within the last year, but their theatrical run was over. Their official theatrical run was over by that time. And that's how I remember watching Spaceballs. Was I'd heard a lot about it from my friends who really liked it. And of course, they told me all sorts of scenes from it and would, dictate the movie to me. So I knew a lot about it before I went into it. But I saw it through one of these summer movie programs in the movie theater. I saw it with my dad. And I remember how kind of uncomfortable I was, because I was still pretty young when it came out. And there's a lot of cursing in this movie. And I remember being very uncomfortable because I was sitting with my dad, and my dad doesn't curse ever, still doesn't curse. He just doesn't do it. And so I felt kind of bad for him in some ways, but he enjoyed it. I saw him, he chuckled and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because I wasn't prepared for that as a kid. So that's the biggest thing that I remember. Was it was a young audience. Like I mentioned, it was specifically like that summer program that was meant for kids. So there was a lot of kids in the movie theater watching this, which is kind of interesting. Watching it today, it's like, I don't know how I would feel about having some of my younger children watching this movie, but it definitely at the time, it was geared that way. I mean, it was a very, a lot of kids watched this, and a lot of kids were into it. So it's kind of interesting to have that perspective now as a parent, as opposed to when I was a kid. But yeah, I just remember seeing it with my dad, and like I said, it was some awkward moments, but also a lot of laughs.
Interesting. So, Ronnie, I ask you. I mean, I know that you weren't originally intended to be a part of this segment, but just out of curiosity, I'm curious, how did you first hear about Spaceballs? Because I know it wasn't for me. I know I didn't tell you as like, yo, dude, we're watching Spaceballs today, like I did with Star Trek The Motion Picture. So or Blade Runner for that matter, how did you first hear about Spaceballs? Well, that sounds like a loaded question, doesn't it?
Pretty sure it was from I think it was from Matt. Or, excuse me, Mathis. Yeah, I think Mathis was the one that turned me on to that, or Kashif, one of the two.
Yeah, and these are two of your friends, right?
Yeah, two of my close friends, yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
but yeah, it was one of those two. Can't remember who,
Okay.
but I remember watching it and just laughing hysterically. Though I can say it's been over 10 years since I've seen the movie. Um, but I still laugh hysterically at when they comb the desert.
Okay.
I do remember that, and I remember, Darth Helmet and stuff like that. And I remember Ludicrous Speed and, May the Schwartz be with you and the Schwartz fights and stuff like that. I forgot what their lightsaber fights.
They're
Basically,
kind of like that, but not. Yeah.
They're
yeah, they come from their rings and they hold them
rings.
close to a certain area. But yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was pretty hysterical.
And the only reason I said to specify it was your friends is just we have to remember there's a lot of people watching who I know who those people I know who
Yeah, of course.
they are, but so I was introduced to Spaceball actually through my friends as well. It was a similar kind of scenario as everyone else here. I didn't see this in movie theaters. A lot of the Mel Brooks movies I didn't see in movie theaters. I don't think I've seen a single Mel Brooks movie in a movie theater. Even Robin Hood Men in Tights I didn't watch in the movie theater. I don't know what it is about Mel Brooks' productions, but I was always seeing this on TV or seeing this on VHS. Pretty much every single one. My friends wanted me to watch it because they thought it was funny and it was a Star Wars parody. I was familiar with Mel Brooks because of Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. That's how I knew who we were talking about when they said it was the Mel Brooks movie. I was like, oh, okay. The guy did Young Frankenstein. Okay, I get it. Young Frankenstein is obviously, while a new story, is very much, parodies, Frankenstein, but at the same point is so lovingly faithful to the original Frankenstein. They shot it in black and white. They used a lot of the same props. Like, it's amazing what they did with Young Frankenstein. I think that's part of the reason that
Frankenstein, don't you? Frankenstein.
Yeah. It to me, Young Frankenstein is one of those great movies that Mel Brooks did that still holds up. Which would give you a clue of where I'm probably going with this movie. So I remember watching it. I laughed at a lot of it. I thought a lot of it was funny. There was some parts of it that I was slightly uncomfortable with because of the age in which I saw it. There's a certain point in your age where you're okay with sexual humor and stuff and whatever, and there's other points when you're at a certain age where it's still kind of slightly uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a weird thing. So there was some parts of this that I remember when I first saw it, because I was so much younger, that I felt kind of slightly uncomfortable with. You know what I mean? I just no other way to put it other than that. It's not as uncomfortable as watching some of his other films today for different reasons, but that was kind of my that was pretty much my introduction to it. I'd heard a little bit about it, but I hadn't heard much about it. My friends were really excited to see it, so we just watched it on VHS. And instantly, from watching it actually on VHS, I could see where it was going to become sort of like one of those Mel Brooks kind of classics that people are always talking about, because it has a lot of his trademark humor, but at the same point too, because of its connection to Star Wars, and being probably one of the more high-profile Star Wars parodies. I mean, when I try to think of another Star Wars parody like that, the only other one I could think of off the top of my head would be, what is it? Is it Hardware Wars or whatever? Which is that weird independent film where they take different hardware and appliances and stuff, and they act as if they're ships and whatever. That's another thing I could think of. I mean, there's been other things that have been done that are actually kind of more faithful to Star Wars, Troops and whatever, right? But I could tell instantly this was going to be one of those great parodies that people were going to continue to talk about for years and years and years. And that does seem to be true for the most part, because I think that this film has lived on in the shadow of Star Wars legacy. You know what I mean? As Star Wars continues to move forward, I think people are again continuing to find Spaceballs because I think it's the most high profile, kind of Star Wars parody that really exists. Um, but yeah, so so I just watched with my friends, but I could see where it was going to be around for a long time, and people would still be talking about it. So even though it deviates a lot, it's not, it doesn't follow the Star Wars story as close as you would think, because you'd think when someone says, "Oh, it's a Star Wars parody," you're like, "Oh, okay." When you actually watch the movie, story beats are very different. Certain kind of similar events happen, and you have certain kind of characters you kind of recognize, but overall, generally speaking, it doesn't really follow the Star Wars formula in terms of the story, like at all. So tell me, Eric. Of course, obviously, we recently viewed this, for the retrospective to talk about how we feel about the film today. So tell me, what are your thoughts about Spaceballs today? But that sounds like a loaded question too, doesn't it? How do you feel about Spaceballs today?
Well, obviously there was a reason that we paired this up with Lower Decks. The reason being that this is a sci-fi comedy, and sci-fi comedies are actually pretty hard to come by. There aren't a whole lot of examples. It's not really a genre. It's not really even a subgenre. It's just there's a couple films out there that did this, and you mentioned a couple of the other ones, and there's really not that many. And it's important to note, like Hardware Wars and Troops, those are short films. And generally, they're actually put into the fan film category. They're not even usually thought of as necessarily as sci-fi comedies or even, sci-fi satire, if you will, which is an even smaller genre, I guess. So it's kind of interesting. We paired these up for a reason, and the reason being that this is an example of sci-fi comedy. And in a lot of ways, I think this is an example of sci-fi comedy done right. It's a funny movie. Granted, you kind of have to be into Mel Brooks' style, and anybody who's seen a Mel Brooks, movie kind of knows that. They kind of know what they're in for. And if you don't like that kind of humor, you're not going to like Spaceballs. You pretty much have to be into his style. And Mel Brooks does kind of have his own, specific style in terms of the humor and everything. It's a lot of sexual humor. It's a lot of as we mentioned, a lot of language. You know what I mean? There's a lot. The use of profanity is pretty fast and loose in this film. But I think somehow it works. And what's funny is, I keep thinking about the fact that this movie was rated PG in 1987. That to me is fascinating because, like, for instance, Lower Decks is TV 14. So, for film, it would be like in the PG-13 category or possibly even R. And whereas this was rated PG, despite what they were doing. Like I said, there's a lot of sexual humor. There's a lot of profanity in this film. But somehow it works. And somehow I think people just kind of get that it's silly. It's fun. You talked about the story. Well, Dave, there really isn't much of one. there isn't much of a story to this. They do follow, I think, actually a lot of the Star Wars stuff. And actually, what I also think is interesting is there's a lot of Star Trek references in this film as well. It's not just a Star Wars parody. People usually think of it that way because, that's the most obvious comparison. The characters, most of the main characters, basically are like characters in Star Wars. Darth Helmet is supposed to be like Darth Vader, obviously. We have Barf, who's obviously supposed to be like Chewbacca. We can go on and on with the characters and say, yeah, this is obviously who they're supposed to be. But there's actually a ton of Star Trek references in this as well. One of the funnier bits I like is the transporter accident that they have with Mel Brooks' character. He actually plays two characters, but his evil character, where he's the president of Planet Spaceball, he actually has a transporter malfunction, which is pretty funny. And he even specifically says, because he's apprehensive about using it. And he's all like, well, it works on Star Trek, so why not give it a try? And they even have the operator of the transporter is a Scotsman. And they actually play that up very, obviously, that it's a Scotsman who's operating the transporter. So there's actually a lot of Star Trek references in this film as well that are pretty fun. And then there's also references to Planet of the Apes. I think 2001 as well. Those are the main. sci-fi films that are parodied in one way or another in this film. And it's like I said, I think it's a interesting example of sci-fi comedy done right, and I think it's a pretty funny movie.
So my take on it is, I guess, would kind of lean into what you were saying before about it's a Mel Brooks movie, so you have to be kind of in that kind of mindset, and you have to be able to kind of appreciate that. So, and like I said, like I love Young Frankenstein. I consider that in my mind to also be like a classic. And Spaceballs is an interesting film, but it's one of those films I don't rewatch a lot. It's never really very high on my radar. When I'm thinking of something fun to watch or whatever, unfortunately, Spaceballs is not the thing that immediately comes to mind. But having recently rewatched it, I had forgotten like a lot of the kind of funny gags and how much fun they kind of have with different things, and just how enjoyable a movie it is, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. If you get all the references, and you're kind of steeped into that, it just like what I said earlier about Lower Decks having the trappings of tracking and pulling you in, because this has its own versions of the Star Wars trapping, and it just kind of pulls you in. It works. It works really well, and it's very entertaining. There's a few bits kind of here and there that still kind of fall flat with me, but they're the same. They're the same kind of character beats that fell flat for me before when I first saw it. I think there's just sometimes for me, there's just a bit of a disconnect, But I will say this: if you haven't seen it a little while, it's worth giving it a revisit. If you've never seen it before and you're curious about it, I would say like if you enjoy Blazing Saddles, if you enjoy things like Airplane or Naked Gun, or like if you like those kind of really kind of silly at times, very slapstick, again, kind of humor. I think Spaceballs is definitely a movie for you. I think you would definitely enjoy it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I It's weird because I want to say the film doesn't quite hold up really well, but in all honesty, the more I think about it and I think about what it is and the place that it exists in the world being, in my mind anyway, the most high profile probably, and I think Eric hit the nail on the head, sci-fi, parody or comedy film. It's up there in a class all by itself. There's not really anything I could think of to immediately compare it to. It's kind of its own unique thing, and that's what I think helps give it its kind of enduring legacy. So Ronnie, I know you didn't participate in the Rogues retrospective here with Spaceballs, and you said it's been a little while since you've seen the film.
A little while is understatement.
Okay. So it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat as me. I don't often think about rewatching Spaceballs. The funny thing is, I wonder why. I wonder if it's a question of the humor not clicking as well as maybe it could. But I will say this, having recently watched it, it's a lot of fun. If you're looking for something that's science fiction, that's silly, that you want to laugh at, I think this is definitely a good candidate for that. It's got a lot of really good laughs in it, especially if you've never seen it. So yeah, I would definitely say that I would recommend checking out Spaceballs. I think it's a fun sci-fi comedy in its own little weird niche where there isn't a lot of those.
Yeah.
Maybe here in the future there'll be one more that can sit in that space that can give Spaceballs a run for its money. But that movie hasn't been made yet. But I know some people that are working on it.
Cool.
That was also another form of a weird shameless plug.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, no, I do shameless plugs too. I mean, my God, like if I'm in Walmart or something like that, and someone's looking at D&D, I'm like, hey, check this out.
Yeah, that's I don't think I've quite done that before. We do have a comment actually from Bobby Chambers over the Rogues Gallery. He says, I thought it was interesting that George Lucas wouldn't allow them to make merchandise, which is why they have the scene with Mel Brooks at the merch table. If you look at the lunchbox, it's actually a Transformers box. Yeah, I noticed that, Bobby. I noticed that as well. And it's weird too because we reviewed it for the show. I actually saw where someone was selling they had a T-shirt and a mask combo, and it said official Spaceballs T-shirt, like movie T-shirt or something. It was a weird little kind of thing, and I was thinking about the fact that there isn't a lot of stuff that they've even done, even in the wake of things. But yeah, like I said, I always wonder because, like, for me, when I think about it, it sits in, like, I think Eric said it at best. It does kind of sit like in its own little sort of like genre niche because there isn't a lot of high profile like sci-fi, comedy movies. Now, there's certain science fiction films that people would tell you are so goofy and silly they might as well be a comedy movie, but in reality, they're not actually a comedy movie. So it does sit in its own little sort of niche, and I know it's popular and it has its fans. But I've been kind of surprised in all the run-up of all the merchandise of everything that's been going on the last few years. I am surprised that they haven't made like a couple items, kind of here and there, actually from Spaceballs. Yeah, I don't know.
Bobby, I had no idea about that. That's a really interesting story. I did not know that's the reason for the scene. I thought they were just making fun of the fact that Star Wars was so heavily merchandised, and the fact that that is exactly where they made tons and tons of money is from the merchandise. I didn't realize it was something where Lucas somehow blocked Mel Brooks from doing anything with the film. I didn't know that, and I'm kind of curious how he would even have accomplished that. And by the way, I'm pretty sure because I just watched it today. It's not the lunchbox that's Transformers; it's the coloring book. The coloring book is Transformers. The lunchbox actually is a Spaceballs made-up lunchbox, but it's the coloring book that has Optimus Prime on it. I literally just watched it a few hours ago. So Bobby does say, he said, I'd buy a Pizza the Hut Funko Pop. That's actually probably a perfect brand for Spaceballs because they seem to have everything else under the sun. So that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Pizza the Hut Funko. I would like to have Darth Helmet. I think Darth Helmet would be fun. I mean, that's obviously a natural bobblehead type of thing. So
yeah. I could definitely see Dark Helmet. I could see Barf being popular, because it's John Candy and that character is really popular. Yeah,
the yogurt plush actually in the film.
Yeah. I'm surprised they haven't actually made one of those, to be honest. And
according to Bobby, there's legal reasons for it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I was just gonna say, well, anyhow, it's not that terribly important. I had a thought, but it was fleeting and it left me.
There actually is a scene where Darth Helmet is playing with the little action figures from,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder how much those would be worth, or who has those props.
Oh.
The Spaceballs figures. That'd be pretty fun.
I'm pretty sure if they do have those props that, I mean, I would tend to think they would have a certain amount of value to them, but that's, not beyond just movie props, but just the fact that there isn't a lot of stuff from Spaceballs. If you are want to be a collector of stuff from Spaceballs, I haven't even seen a lot of artists do their own versions of the movie poster and stuff. Sometimes in certain films people will do that. I haven't even seen many people even do that.
There was a Spaceballs series, an animated series, which I never actually. Actually, now I'm trying to think. Did it actually air, or was it just in development? Because I remember there being a Spaceballs animated series, and I can't remember how far they went with it.
I don't remember there being a Spaceballs animated series.
Me either.
Doesn't mean there wasn't one.
What I'm thinking is, was it just in development, or did it actually ever air anywhere?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
It shows up on IMDb. It says 2008, Spaceballs, the animated series.
Oh, that's fairly recent then.
15 episodes.
Huh.
Can't see right off the bat what network it was on. So yeah, there was a Spaceballs animated series as well.
Oh, it was on G4. Now it makes sense.
That's right, G4. That's right. It was on the video game cable channel.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now it suddenly makes sense.
Bobby says we need to find it and watch it. Retrospective go.
All right. Well, we'll see. I didn't even
I
realize
don't know
it
where it's
existed,
available. I don't know
so-
if it's available anywhere. Because I remember it not being very successful. So, but it does exist. It does exist. There is a Spaceballs animated series.
Interesting. Well, do we think we're good here?
Yeah, I would give it a recommend. Like I said, I think it is comedy done right. I will say for myself, I don't. Dave mentioned that he hasn't watched it in a while. He doesn't watch it very often. For me personally, I don't watch any comedies very often because I always feel like if I watch a comedy too many times, it's not going to be funny to me anymore. So that's just my last little take there.
Interesting. Well, and like I said, I would recommend it as well, partly because it does sit in a unique little niche when there isn't where there are not a lot of other films that kind of sit within that sort of subgenre. So I would think it's definitely worth checking out there.
Yeah, and Jane mentions that it aired in 2008.
Interesting. Well, because G4 had their own. I think if you had cable, they had a channel.
Right. I used to watch G4. I actually used to watch it on cable. I remember G4 quite well. There was, I think Attack of the Show was their big thing. They had a couple other ones.
Yep.
So I remember G4.
Very cool. So do we think that's good? Are we good to go to the outro?
Yeah, I think we're good. We're right
Okay.
on the 3-hour mark. So.
All right. Very cool. All right. So I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening. Well, hold on. Let me get this set up right. Sorry about that. So I want to thank you for watching and hopefully listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I've been one of your hosts. You can get that new Star Dogs t-shirt available now over at kirbytees.com. You see the URLs right there. It's available for sale right now. Definitely consider going out and picking one of these up and supporting Kirby Tees. I greatly appreciate it.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Did Dave just freeze up? Yep, he froze up, huh? It looks like he actually fell out of the stream. Ronnie, can you let folks know where you can be contacted at?
Yeah, I can be contacted on Facebook to the Saturday Night Gaming page. Also, Turn the Page has a Facebook page there as well, and also a YouTube channel, the same name. And if you want to check out our podcast, check out Saturday Night Gaming LLC.com, and they'll have all the links that you need to listen to all of us. I'm just one of the many people that works on it. The head honcho is actually Scott Hibbard, And on Turn the Page, the head honcho on that one is Tony Stevens, and one of the co-hosts. And it is a blast to work with them, and I'm blessed to be a part of that.
And those links should be available in all of the chats. I did share those links that you gave me earlier in the chat. So anybody wondering what those were, those are the links for the pages that Ronnie's involved with. I'm sorry that we lost Dave in the feed. I'm guessing just technical difficulties. But if you guys want to check me out or contact me, I am basically most active on Twitter. And my handle is at BaseGod14, at BASSGOD14. My DMs are open. That's also the official YouTube channel and also the official Twitch. And going back to the Rogues Gallery, Jane had a comment, and I'm definitely going to pass this on to Dave, although Jane, I'm sure you could as well. It says, what do you think about Suburban Commando, the movie starring Hulk Hogan? And with that, we will leave the Rogues Gallery with the last word.